If you enjoy stepping into the past, remember to like and subscribe. Now, tell me who should travel next and in what year. Before we begin another journey, I would really love to know which state you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Let me know in the comments. All right, settle in, because we're throwing a 52-year-old microbiologist, a man named Arthur, headfirst into the clamor and filth of Florence, Italy, in the year 1347 CE. He blinks awake, his head throbbing with a dull ache, the air thick and heavy with a stench so profound it burns his nasal passages. It's not just one smell, but a cacophony of odors, fermenting refuse, unwashed bodies, animal waste, and an underlying sweetness that hints at decay. Something deeply unsettling. Above it all, a chorus of bells rings out, some close, some distant, a jarring, incessant clamor that makes his teeth ache. He feels the damp, cold earth beneath him, a scratchy wool tunic against his skin, utterly alien to the crisp cotton pajamas he wore just moments ago. Or so it feels. He pushes himself up, his limbs stiff, and his gaze sweeps over narrow, cobblestone streets teeming with people. Their clothes are rough, earthy tones, their faces often grimy. The architecture is stone, dark, imposing. Nothing like the neat, modern lines of his apartment building. His mind, trained in precise observation, immediately registers the total lack of sanitation. Gutters run with what he instinctively knows is human waste. Discarded food scraps litter every corner, and rats, massive, bold ones, scurry fearfully, but constantly through the debris. The air itself feels heavy, a palpable cloud of particulate matter and microbial life. His training screams vectors, pathogens, contamination. He sees the dark, matted hair, the unwashed hands, the casual spitting on the street, and a shiver that has nothing to do with the cool morning air runs through him. This place is a biological war zone. Arthur spends his first week in a daze, driven by basic needs. He finds a meager existence, begging for scraps of bread or working for a few coins, hauling refuse or goods in the crowded marketplace. Every interaction is a sensory assault. The sheer number of flies is staggering, landing on food, on people, on open wounds. He instinctively tries to keep his distance, holding a scrap of cloth over his nose and mouth when he can. A futile gesture, he knows, but one that offers a sliver of psychological comfort. He notices the subtle signs on people's faces, a weariness beyond labor, a sudden cough, a feverish glaze in the eyes of passers-by. He sees what he knows are the first, faint whispers of the coming storm, the invisible enemy he spent his life studying, now surrounding him in its ancient, untamed form. His modern understanding, his deep knowledge of how quickly microscopic threats could spread through such an environment, becomes a terrifying, suffocating burden. Each day the bells ring, marking time, marking something else too. He just doesn't have the language or the tools to articulate the ticking clock he hears in his mind. He curls up each night on straw, the smells never truly leaving him, the cacophony of the city only dimming, never silencing the immense effort of merely existing, of navigating this alien world without a single familiar anchor, drains him. He understands now, with chilling clarity, that knowing the enemy is one thing, fighting it with bare hands in a world that doesn't even know it exists is an entirely different battle. Each step you take sends a jarring pain through your soles, up your calves, and into your aching knees. The cobblestones of Florence are mercilessly uneven, a constant, brutal massage to your tender, 52-year-old feet, accustomed to the cushioned support of modern sneakers and smooth, paved surfaces. Your rough, ill-fitting leather shoes offer little solace, and by midday, the insistent throbbing is a dull, relentless companion. The memory of your ergonomic office chair, the springy mattress, the sheer, unthinking comfort of your previous life, flickers like a phantom limb. It's a ghost of ease, a cruel reminder of what's been lost in this relentless physical struggle. You observe the locals, their gait accustomed to the treacherous ground, their bare or simply shod feet hardened. Their bodies are wiry, tough, forged by a life of manual labor and constant movement. Your own, softened by decades of desk work and comfortable living, protests every single demand. Your back aches from stooping. Your muscles burn from carrying water buckets from the communal well. And the constant threat of slipping on slick, excrement-stained stones keeps your senses on a high, exhausting alert. Your mind, the mind of a microbiologist, is constantly at war with your surroundings. You see a woman wiping her child's runny nose with the back of her hand, then reaching into a basket of bread she's selling. You watch men spit copiously into the street. The communal eating, the shared cups, the lack of any discernible hand washing prior to food preparation. It's a living textbook of disease transmission. You find yourself trying small, almost unconscious acts of self-preservation. You rub your hands on your rough tunic after touching anything. A futile gesture, you know, but one that provides a tiny, momentary psychological shield. You seek out the cleanest looking water source, instinctively trying to filter it with a piece of cloth you managed to acquire, earning you curious, sometimes suspicious glances from those who observe your strange rituals. They simply drink directly, unconcerned. You manage to secure a short-term job helping in a tanner's shop near the Arno River. The smell is beyond belief. A putrid mix of animal hides, urine, and chemicals that clings to your clothes, your skin, your very pores. But here, at least, is water, even if it's industrial. you discreetly attempt to wash your hands more thoroughly than usual, scrubbing them with harsh soap made of ash and animal fat, trying to imagine the microscopic hordes being swept away. The simple act of washing feels like a profound, desperate scientific experiment. You notice the cuts and sores on the hands of your fellow workers, open invitations for infection, yet they seem to ignore them, a testament to a world where minor ailments were just a part of living or dying. The Arno itself, the lifeblood of the city, serves as its sewer, its laundry, its waste disposal. As the week grinds on, the physical fatigue becomes a constant, heavy blanket. Your muscles are sore, your joints scream, and your feet are bruised beyond feeling. The thought of a long, hot shower, of clean clothes, of a simple, sterile environment is a distant, almost painful fantasy. You realize that mere survival here is an all-consuming task, one that drains your mental and physical reserves completely. Your advanced knowledge feels both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because you see the dangers, a curse because you are utterly powerless to stop them. And the sheer, relentless dirt of it all is a constant, exhausting battle. A wet, rattling cough explodes unexpectedly close, making him flinch and pull back instinctively. It's a sound he knows intimately from a modern, clinical context. But here, in the bustling, unwashed throng of a Florentine alleyway, it's stripped of its sterile environment, raw and unfiltered. He turns, seeing a young man, perhaps in his 20s, hunched over, his face pale and clammy, his eyes unnaturally bright. The man wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, a hand already smudged with dirt, and what Arthur's trained eye recognizes as dried mucus. His microbiologist's mind immediately goes into overdrive, cataloging the symptoms. That cough isn't just a cough, it's a potential aerosol, a microscopic cloud of pathogens. He notices the subtle shivers running through the young man's frame, the slightly labored breathing. This isn't just a cold. Throughout the day, as he works odd jobs hauling goods from the docks or cleaning stables, his senses are heightened, scanning the crowds. He sees more. A child with teary, bloodshot eyes and a faint rash on her neck. An older woman with a persistent, hacking cough that echoes in the narrow streets. A man slumped against a wall, his skin unusually flushed, his gaze distant. The locals seem to pay these signs little mind, or perhaps they're simply accustomed to a constant background hum of illness. Fevers, coughs, stomach upsets. They are just part of the fabric of life, often attributed to bad humors, divine displeasure, or malevolent spirits. But for Arthur, it's different. He sees the invisible network, the pathways of contagion, the tiny, relentless organisms reproducing and spreading through every unwashed hand, every shared cup, every close breath. His knowledge, once a source of professional pride, has become a terrifying burden, a lens through which he sees a world teetering on the edge of catastrophe. He finds himself subtly altering his movements, maintaining a wider berth around anyone who shows even the slightest sign of malaise. He attempts to hold his breath when passing particularly close to a coughing individual, a desperate and largely useless act, but one that his instincts demand. He avoids touching faces, even his own, trying to keep his hands away from his mouth and nose. An unconscious habit from years in the lab, now elevated to a desperate survival tactic. He observes a man selling medicinal herbs, claiming cures for fevers and bad airs. And Arthur knows, with a chilling certainty, that their understanding is as far from the truth as the earth is from the sun. The sheer scale of microbial life in this environment, invisible yet omnipresent, feels suffocating. This week, the fear isn't just about his physical discomfort or the stark brutality of life. It's a deeper, more insidious dread. A dread rooted in understanding the enemy that nobody else can see. He feels like a lone sentry, watching an invisible army gather, knowing that the walls are about to fall, and that his warnings, if he could even utter them, would only be met with confusion, or worse, suspicion. The silence of ignorance around him is deafening, making his internal screams all the more piercing. He sees the child first, not by sound, but by the stark, unnatural stillness around her. In a busy market square, where noise usually swirls like dust, a small pocket of silence clings to the young girl. She sits propped against a wall, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, her body curled in on itself, skeletal beneath a thin, dirty tunic. Her face is pale, clammy, and her eyes, wide open, gaze blankly at nothing. There's a vacancy in them, a listless, feverish stare that chills him more than the brisk morning air. He instinctively feels the heat radiating from her even before he is close enough, a palpable wave of sickness. His breath catches. This is it. Not the vague coughs and shivers from last week, but a clear, undeniable presentation of severe illness. His mind immediately reconstructs the scene, the vectors, the spread, the likely Yersinia pestes already coursing through her tiny veins. He wants to reach out to check for swollen lymph nodes, to feel her forehead, to do something. But he hesitates, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. There are no sterile gloves, no thermometers, no antibiotics, no way to even confirm his diagnosis, let alone treat it. He's a microbiologist with all the knowledge of the 21st century, rendered utterly impotent by the absence of its tools. The modern assumptions of intervention, of a fight against disease, crumble in the face of this stark, brutal reality. A woman, likely her mother, hovers nearby, occasionally stroking the child's hair, her own face etched with a despair that needs no words. She murmurs prayers, perhaps, or speaks of evil humors. Other passers-by cast glances of pity, or perhaps fear, quickly moving on. No one suggests anything beyond comfort or prayer. Arthur observes the constant flies, landing indiscriminately on the child's face, on discarded food, on the open sores of others. He sees the rats scurry past just inches from the child's feet. The entire environment is a petri dish, and he's standing in the middle of it, an unwitting observer of a catastrophe he understands far too well. He feels a profound, almost physical ache in his chest, a chilling touch of despair. This isn't a lab culture he can isolate, study, and then treat with targeted compounds. This is a child, suffering, dying, and he, a man who knows the exact biological mechanism of her agony, is utterly incapable of offering salvation. His knowledge, which in his own time was power, is here a torturous, isolating burden. Every instinct screams at him to sanitize, to treat, to prevent. Yet every fiber of this ancient world laughs at his impotence. The simple act of breathing in the same air, sharing the same space, now feels like an act of profound and terrifying recklessness. As the week ends, the image of that child's vacant stare lingers, a stark and brutal reminder of his new reality. He realizes his understanding of the microscopic world does not grant him immunity, nor does it grant him the power to change anything here. It only gives him a dreadful, lonely foresight, a heavy cloak of dread that he must wear in silence, a shiver deeper and more insistent than any he has felt before, snakes through him, seizing his ribs and refusing to release its grip. The chill is bone deep, a pervasive, damp cold that seems to emanate from the very stones of Florence and penetrate the thin, worn wool of his tunic. He huddles in the corner of a recessed doorway, trying to draw his knees closer to his chest. But the meager warmth generated by his own body seems to dissipate instantly into the cold night air. The gnawing ache in his stomach, a dull, constant companion for days, sharpens with the cold, demanding sustenance he doesn't have. This week, the quest for warmth and food becomes a singular, overwhelming focus, eclipsing even the constant dread of disease. His modern mind, accustomed to abundance, struggles to comprehend the sheer scarcity. He learns to scrounge, to watch for discarded apple cores, to eye the scraps falling from merchant stalls with a desperation he never imagined. The challenge isn't just finding food, it's finding safe food. He sees open barrels of salted fish swarming with flies, bread laid bare on dusty tables, meat hanging in the sun, attracting clouds of buzzing insects. His microbiological training screams at the potential for contamination, for food poisoning, for dysentery. Yet his hunger, a primal, insistent roar pushes him towards these risks. He cleans anything he can with painstaking effort, rubbing bread on his tunic to dislodge visible dirt, washing fruit repeatedly in the often questionable water from the public fountains, knowing how little good it truly does. He notices the others, their faces leaner, their eyes sharper, locked in the same daily struggle. Winter is approaching, and the days grow shorter, the cold more biting. He sees evidence of families sharing what little they have, huddled together for warmth. He observes the occasional distribution of alms from a church or a wealthy patron, a chaotic scramble that underscores the desperation. His scientific assumptions about health and well-being, always framed within the context of a well-nourished, hydrated body, are constantly challenged. Here, the immediate threat of starvation or freezing often outweighs the invisible, theoretical threat of bacteria. He tries to find warmth where he can near the communal bread ovens during the day, or by huddling close to animals in a stable when he can sneak in. The animal warmth is a surprising comfort, but also a stark reminder of the close proximity of species, another vector for disease. He considers the implications of living like this long-term, of the gradual erosion of personal hygiene, the slow dulling of his modern sensibilities under the constant pressure of cold and hunger. The memory of his heated apartment, a refrigerator full of food, a clean bed, fades further into the realm of impossible dreams. By the end of this week, the illusions of a temporary hardship have crumbled. The gnawing hunger and the persistent, biting cold have cemented a terrible truth. This isn't a visit. This is his life now. His body aches, his stomach growls, and his mind, once focused on the microscopic, now cycles through the fundamental, desperate questions of animal survival: food, warmth, shelter. The scientific detachment he once possessed is slowly being replaced by a visceral understanding of basic human need, a stripping away of all but the most immediate, brutal realities. The sharp, acrid scent of burning sage and rosemary suddenly cuts through the omnipresent stink of Florence, a brief, medicinal balm to his senses. He watches a woman waving a smoking censer over her doorway, a ritual to purify the air, to ward off miasma and sickness. It's an act of desperate hope, a folk remedy against an unseen enemy. And in that moment, something shifts within him. His helplessness, which had been a heavy, suffocating weight, begins to coalesce into a fierce, urgent desire to do something. However small, however foolish, he is a microbiologist. His very being is about understanding and mitigating unseen threats. He sees a young mother, haggard and worn, preparing a meager meal for her children near a communal pump. Her hands, calloused and grimy, handle the bread and vegetables, then wipe a child's face then return to the food. He remembers the child from last week, the vacant stare. With a deep breath, he approaches, his heart pounding. He gestures towards the pump, then to his own hands, miming a vigorous scrubbing action, using a handful of ash from a nearby brazier as a symbolic cleanser. He tries to convey, through earnest looks and simple gestures, that washing hands before touching food could help. He points to the dirty ground, then to the food, trying to suggest a connection without speaking a single anachronistic word. The woman stares at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. She clutches her youngest child closer, her gaze flickering to the strange man making odd motions. Her lips tighten, and she shakes her head slowly, pulling her children away, her hand unconsciously making a sign against evil. Other villagers working nearby pause, their eyes fixed on him. Murmurs rise, hushed and suspicious. He hears words like strano, stregon, strange man, sorcerer. His modern assumption that a simple, demonstrative act of hygiene would be universally understood and appreciated shatters against the wall of medieval superstition and fear. His knowledge, instead of being a gift, feels like a dangerous, alien force in this world. Later in the week, he tries again, more subtly. He sees a group of children playing, their hands covered in dirt, then reaching for shared fruit. He finds a small, smooth stone, rubs it against his tunic, then washes it meticulously in the public fountain, making exaggerated movements. He then offers it to one of the children. The child looks at the clean stone, then at his own dirty hands, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He slowly, hesitantly, takes the stone, his small fingers tracing its smooth surface. A glimmer, faint but undeniable, passes through Arthur. Not acceptance, not understanding, but perhaps a tiny seed of observation. He recognizes the immense chasm between his world and theirs, a gap not just of technology, but of fundamental understanding of how the world works, how illness spreads. As the week closes, Arthur feels the crushing weight of his isolation, the profound challenge of conveying even the most basic truths of his science. But within that weight, a tiny spark flickers. The child with the stone, the woman who perhaps paused for a moment of thought before dismissing him. It's a fragile, almost invisible hope, yet it's enough to propel him forward, to keep trying. He understands now that changing a world requires more than knowledge. It requires trust, understanding, and a monumental patience he is only just beginning to learn. The intense, comforting heat of the brick oven washes over him, a physical embrace against the persistent Florentine chill. The air in the bakery is thick with the sweet, yeasty scent of rising dough, mingled with the faint, warm smell of wood smoke and baked grain. He feels the sweat trickling down his back, a rare warmth. as he shoves another heavy tray of loaves deep into the roaring inferno with a long, unwieldy peel. This is heavy, relentless work, far more physically demanding than anything his 52-year-old body, accustomed to a lab bench and a comfortable commute, has ever known. He has managed to secure a spot helping the baker, a gruff but fair man who sees the desperation in Arthur's eyes. His pay is not coins, but scraps, the hardened ends of loaves, a bowl of thin gruel, sometimes a piece of overripe fruit. It's meager, but it's consistent, and crucially, it's cooked. His microbiologist's mind understands the immense value of this. Heat, at least, kills most of the bacterial threats he so acutely fears from raw, exposed foods. He watches the baker and his apprentices, their hands always dusted with flour, occasionally wiping sweat from their brows with the back of a hand before kneading another batch of dough. He cringes internally, but he also observes their resilience. They work from before dawn until well after dusk, their movements efficient, their bodies hardened. He tries, subtly, to influence the processes he can when he's allowed to clean the wooden kneading troughs. He scrapes them with unusual diligence, using hot water from the nearby oven and scrubbing with coarse sand, trying to physically remove as much organic matter as possible. He discreetly tries to keep the bread away from the dusty floor, pushing errant crumbs into a pile, attempting to clear the space around the fresh loaves. He knows it's a drop in the ocean, that the flour itself, the water, the very air, are teeming with invisible life, but the small acts of control, the small efforts to mitigate risk, give him a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. It's a desperate, almost pathetic application of his skills, but it's all he has. He sees the baker watching his meticulous scrubbing, a flicker of puzzlement in his eyes, but he doesn't interfere. His hands, once soft and scientific, are now raw, chafed, and scarred from burns and cuts, a testament to the brutal rhythm of this life. His back constantly aches. His muscles scream with every lift of a heavy sack of grain, but he also feels a slow, grudging strengthening. The chronic hunger is still there, but it's less annoying terror and more a familiar, dull ache. He observes the Florentine citizens queuing for bread, a staple of their diet, and understands the immense significance of this daily sustenance. The quiet desperation etched on many faces, the value of a simple, warm loaf of bread, once a given, is now a profound, earned blessing. As this week draws to a close, Arthur finds a grim comfort in the routine. The world outside the bakery, with its invisible threats, still terrifies him. But within these warm, yeasty walls, there is a tangible purpose. He is no longer just a microbiologist out of time, but a baker's helper, a laborer. His survival depends less on his advanced knowledge of pathogens and more on his physical endurance and the simple, brutal rhythm of earning his next meal. The intellectual dread is still present, but it's now overlaid with the immediate, visceral truth of hard labor and the profound value of basic sustenance. The rich, earthy smell of stewed vegetables, and perhaps a hint of game meat rises from a communal wooden bowl, steaming gently in the flickering light of a tallow candle. He feels the rough plank of the table beneath his forearms, the warmth of bodies pressed close around him in the baker's cramped living space. After weeks of scavenging and solitary eating, this shared meal feels profoundly alien, yet strangely comforting. His stomach, accustomed to the dull ache of hunger, rumbles in anticipation. The baker, his face ruddy from the heat of his ovens, gestures for him to take a piece of bread from a shared trencher. A thick slice of stale bread serving as a plate. He hesitates, his eyes tracing the paths of crumbs and the faint, greasy residue from previous servings. His modern mind screams about cross-contamination, about E. coli, about influenza. He sees the rough hands reaching for food, children wiping their mouths, then plunging fingers back into the common dish. Every instinct honed in sterile labs urges him to recoil, but then a small hand belonging to the baker's youngest daughter pushes a small roasted carrot towards him, her fingers sticky with grease. She looks up, her eyes wide, a hesitant, shy smile playing on her lips. For a moment, the microbiologist in him fades. The cold, analytical dread that has been his constant companion loosens its grip. He sees not vectors, but a child offering a gift, a gesture of inclusion. He takes the carrot, its warmth a surprising comfort in his palm, and returns her smile with a genuine, if rusty, expression. He eats it slowly, savoring the simple sweetness, the unexpected taste of generosity. It's a silent, profound exchange, a bridge built over the chasm of language and time, forged in the shared vulnerability of basic human need. Throughout the meal, he finds himself observing the subtle dynamics of the family, the quiet respect for the baker, the playful nudges between siblings, the shared laughter over a clumsy spill. He sees a resilience, a tightly knit social fabric that offers a different kind of defense against the harshness of their world. His constant battle against the microscopic is a solitary one, but here he is part of a collective, however temporary. He watches the baker's wife, her face kind, as she ladles out more stew, her movements efficient and loving. He notices the unwashed dishes, the flies buzzing lazily in the warmer air near the hearth, and a part of his mind still registers the danger. But another part, a deeper, more human part, recognizes the warmth of belonging, a comfort he hadn't realized he craved so desperately. As the meal concludes and the family begins to clear the table, a sense of weary peace settles over him. He still carries the immense burden of his foresight, the chilling knowledge of what's to come. But this week, a different truth has emerged, even in a world brimming with invisible threats, where hygiene is a foreign concept and death lurks in every shadow. The human heart seeks connection. The risk of shared germs is real, terrifyingly so. But the balm of shared humanity, even a single offered morsel, can be a potent, unexpected form of sustenance for the soul. The soft hiss and rumble of water boiling in a large iron pot, set directly into the hearth in the baker's home, becomes a strangely comforting sound. A thin veil of clean steam rises, carrying with it a faint, almost sweet scent, devoid of the usual heavy odors of the city. He watches the bubbles surge, knowing that each one is a tiny victory against an invisible army. This week, he has spent more time at the baker's house, helping with chores beyond the oven, and with persistent, patient gestures, he has managed to convey a simple, radical idea that water, once boiled, might be better for drinking, especially for the children. He had started by always drinking boiled water himself, making sure the baker and his family saw him deliberately setting aside water from the well, heating it over the fire, and then cooling it before he took a sip. He would point to the roiling water, then to his own healthy stomach, then to the communal well, and make a vague gesture of disapproval. He pointed to flies, then to the well, then back to the boiled water. It was a slow, painstaking process of demonstration and repetition. The baker, initially puzzled, then curious, had eventually humored him, perhaps seeing a strange but harmless eccentricity. He had let Arthur boil a small pot for his youngest child, the one who had suffered frequent stomach complaints. Now, after several days of this ritual, something subtle but profound is happening. The baker's youngest daughter, who usually had a perpetual runny nose and frequent bouts of intestinal distress, seems to be a little brighter, her eyes clearer. Her younger brother, who had also been sickly, has had no stomach upsets all week. It's a minute change, almost imperceptible to others. But to Arthur's microbiologist's eye, it's a seismic shift. He observes the family more closely, noting that fewer of them are complaining of the daily aches and stomach rumblings that seem to be a constant backdrop to life in Florence. The subtle shift in their health is a thrilling, terrifying validation of his knowledge. He sees the baker watching him, a new expression on his face. Less suspicion, more an intrigued observation. The baker's wife, who had been openly wary, now occasionally nods to him when he fills the boiling pot. His modern assumption that evidence would lead to acceptance is still challenged by their ingrained beliefs about humors and divine will. tangible effect of his actions is slowly, cautiously, making a crack in that wall of ignorance. He isn't talking about miasma. He is showing a healthier child. As the week ends, a cautious hope mixes with the ever-present dread. He has witnessed a small, dangerous victory, a proof of concept. He knows the implications are enormous. The potential butterfly effect on the coming plague, terrifyingly vast. But he also knows the peril of this knowledge. To openly challenge centuries of belief, to claim an invisible enemy in the water, could lead to accusations of witchcraft or heresy. He is walking a knife edge. Each small act of intervention a step closer to either salvation or condemnation. The quiet joy of seeing a healthier child is profound, but so is the chilling realization of the immense, invisible risk he is taking simply by knowing too much. The air around him hums with a different kind of scent, a complex tapestry woven from dried rosemary, crushed lavender, wood smoke, and something sharp, almost sulfuric, perhaps from an ancient salve. It's an olfactory landscape, entirely distinct from the baker's yeasty warmth or the city's general stench, hinting at purpose and carefully collected remedies. He finds himself standing at the threshold of a small, crooked house, set slightly apart from the main thoroughfare, its windows draped with bundles of herbs. The baker, with a rare, quiet gesture, had led him here, a subtle sign of trust following the healthier children. An old woman sits hunched by a low fire, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes, though clouded with age, remarkably sharp. She watches him as he enters, her gaze lingering on his hands, then sweeping over his slightly cleaner tunic, a silent acknowledgement of his unusual habits. This is the local healer, the Strega of the neighborhood, a woman both respected and feared. He feels a profound sense of observation from her, a non-verbal assessment that cuts through his modern assumptions about communication. She doesn't ask questions. She simply watches. He sees her preparing a poultice, crushing green leaves with a stone pestle. Her movements slow but deliberate. He observes her methods with a microbiologist's critical eye. Her hands, though aged, are surprisingly clean compared to many others he's seen. She uses fresh water for her infusions, and while she doesn't boil it with his scientific rigor, she often heats it over the fire. He realizes that, despite her lack of scientific understanding, some of her practical rituals might actually have beneficial, if accidental, hygienic effects. Her use of certain herbs, he knows from his own studies, possess mild antiseptic properties. His modern assumptions about primitive medicine begin to bend, allowing for a grudging respect for empirical observation. Even without a germ theory, he sees a common ground in the intent to alleviate suffering, even if the methods and explanations differ wildly. He offers to help, gesturing towards a pile of medicinal plants needing sorting. She nods slowly, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and gestures for him to sit. For the first time, he feels less like an outsider, less like a strange man muttering to himself, and more like a cautious apprentice, a useful hand in a place that understands the language of sickness. However differently, he helps her dry herbs, keeping them separate, ensuring they are stored in clean, covered jars as best he can manage. He tries to point to the flies, making shooing gestures, and she follows his gaze, her lips thinning, a hint of understanding in her eyes. It's not science, not yet, but it's an intuitive alignment of observation. As the week ends, Arthur finds himself drawn to the healer's quiet corner of Florence, the faint aroma of herbs, the rustle of drying leaves, the low crackle of the fire. It's a different kind of sanctuary. He has found a place where his desire to mitigate suffering, however subtly, is not immediately met with outright suspicion, but with a cautious, knowing gaze. It is a precarious acceptance, a tentative step onto the fringe of this ancient society, but it is acceptance nonetheless. The silence of her home, the deliberate rhythm of her work, offers a strange comfort. He understands that while his knowledge makes him an alien, his desire to help, expressed through actions, might slowly carve out a fragile space for him, a place where his strange ways are seen not as witchcraft, but as a different, perhaps effective, kind of care. The cacophony of the market, once a jarring assault of unfamiliar shouts and animal calls, now registers as a complex, almost rhythmic hum. His ears have begun to differentiate the cries of the fishmonger from the insistent bleating of goats, the haggling over cloth from the cheerful banter of fruit sellers. The air is a vibrant tapestry of smells. Fresh bread from his own bakery work, pungent cheeses, damp earth, ripe fruit, and now the distinct, sharp aroma of various herbs laid out on makeshift stalls. He carries a small pouch of copper coins, meager payment from the baker, but enough to acquire a few specific plants for the healer. He approaches a stall where an old woman, her hands stained green, meticulously arranges bunches of rosemary, thyme, and various flowering plants he recognizes only vaguely. He holds out a piece of parchment from the healer, on which crude drawings of specific leaves and blossoms are etched. He gestures to the drawings, then to the herbs, carefully pointing to the ones he needs. His fingers hover over a bunch of feverfew, its tiny white flowers vibrant. His modern mind immediately recalls its anti-inflammatory properties, a natural aspirin of sorts. He points to it, then mimes a headache, a universal gesture. The woman nods, her eyes shrewd, and plucks a generous bunch. The bartering is a dance he's slowly learning. He offers his coins, then waits, watching her expression, her subtle movements. He shakes his head slightly at her initial offer, then holds out one less coin, a silent negotiation. She scoffs, but a glint in her eye tells him she expects this. He gestures to the quality of the herbs, plucking a loose leaf and sniffing it deeply. A gesture of connoisseurship he hopes to convey. Eventually, they settle, a silent agreement struck. He feels a small, almost childish triumph. He's navigating, not just surviving, but actively participating in this ancient economy. His observational skills, honed in the precise world of microbiology, now translate into reading human microexpressions and market dynamics. He moves through the throng, observing not just the goods, but the people. He sees a beggar with a festering sore on his leg, and his gaze falls to the swarm of flies. He sees children playing with stray dogs, then sharing bites of an apple. The unseen threat is always present, a constant background hum of dread, but it no longer paralyzes him. He instinctively keeps his distance from anyone exhibiting clear signs of illness, a habit now ingrained. He notes which food vendors keep their produce covered, which ones seem cleaner, applying a subconscious risk assessment to every purchase, every interaction. His modern assumptions about the necessity of cleanliness, once alien to these people, are now just his personal, quiet rules of engagement. As the week passes, the sheer volume of daily life, the raw, unfiltered energy of the market, feels less like an alien assault and more like a river he is learning to swim in. He's no longer drowning in the unfamiliarity. He knows the roots, the rhythms, the unspoken rules. He finds himself anticipating certain vendors, recognizing faces in the crowd. There's still immense danger, pervasive filth, and the chilling knowledge of what's to come. But within this brutal, ancient world, he is finding a fragile foothold, a routine, a way to move through it without constant, overwhelming terror. He is not just alive, he is beginning to live, however precariously. Within its strange, beautiful, and deadly pulse, the soft, flickering glow of an oil lamp casts dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls, painting faces in warm ochre and deep sepia. He feels the comforting heat of the small, contained fire in the hearth, a stark contrast to the biting night air outside, the sound of low murmurs, punctuated by sudden bursts of genuine, uninhibited laughter, fills the cozy room, a melody far sweeter than the constant clang of bells or the distant cries of the street. He sits on a rough stool in the baker's home, a cup of weak, warm wine in his hand, feeling the surprising weight of a small child leaning against his leg. This evening, the usual nightly dread of unknown threats and biting cold has receded, replaced by an unexpected sense of ease. The baker, his wife, the healer who now often joins them, and their children are gathered, sharing stories of local lore, of saints and spirits, of clever peasants outwitting cruel lords. He doesn't understand all the words, but the cadence of their voices, the animated gestures, the shared looks of amusement or wonder transcend the language barrier. He finds himself mimicking the rhythm of their laughter, a sound he realizes, with a jolt, he hasn't truly felt or joined in for weeks, perhaps months, even in his own time, his analytical mind, though still noticing the shared cup, the close breaths, the absence of any true ventilation, is momentarily eclipsed by the simple, profound warmth of human connection. His modern assumptions about companionship, often mediated by screens or structured events, melt away in this raw, unfiltered communion. Here, sharing warmth, food, and the simple act of presence is the essence of connection. He watches the healer, her aged eyes bright with amusement at a tale, and the baker's daughter, who now openly smiles at him, her earlier shyness replaced by an easy acceptance. He feels a part of something, however small and transient, a fleeting sense of belonging in a world that has otherwise been relentlessly alien and hostile. The constant need for vigilance against an invisible enemy, the microbiologist's burden, relaxes its grip, allowing a forgotten joy to surface. The stories are rich, steeped in a world governed by observable phenomena and divine will, not unseen microbes. They speak of ailments as curses or imbalances, not bacteria or viruses. Yet in their telling, there's a resilience, a collective spirit that faces down the harsh realities of their existence with shared comfort. He finds himself responding to a particularly funny story, not with words, but with a wide, open-mouthed grin, a soundless chuckle that earns him a warm, accepting nod from the baker. It's a fundamental human experience, stripped bare of modern complexities, and it is a profound revelation. As the lantern light dwindles and the family begins to prepare for bed, a quiet peace settles over him. He knows the threats haven't vanished. The dark streets outside still hold cold and disease, and the plague is an inevitable shadow looming on the horizon. But for tonight, the warmth of shared laughter, the simple comfort of being amongst other human beings, has provided a potent antidote to his pervasive dread. He realizes that even in the face of insurmountable scientific challenges, the human spirit's capacity for connection and joy remains an undeniable, vital force. A different kind of strength in this brutal, beautiful, lantern-lit darkness. The rough, splintered edge of a new wooden peg bites into his thumb as he drives it firmly into a joint, securing a wobbly shelf in the baker's storage room. The clean, earthy smell of freshly cut wood, mingled with the familiar scent of flour, fills the cramped space. He feels the satisfying thud of the mallet, the vibration running up his arm a different kind of precision than pipettes and microscopes, but a precision nonetheless. His hands, once accustomed to delicate instruments, now move with a growing confidence around hammer, saw, and simple tools. This week, his quiet observations and practical applications of his modern reasoning have begun to yield a tangible shift in how he is perceived. The baker, seeing Arthur's methodical approach to tasks, not just doing them, but often improving them, has started to seek his advice. When a leak developed in the bakery's roof, Arthur didn't just carry buckets. He studied the flow of water, traced it back to a loose tile, and with a few well-placed stones and mud, managed to redirect the worst of the drip. It wasn't engineering, not by modern standards, but it was applied problem solving, a basic understanding of cause and effect that made a noticeable difference. The baker's nod of gratitude was deeper, more meaningful than any coin. At the healer's small dwelling, Arthur helps organize her collection of herbs, suggesting a system of drying and storage that minimizes dampness and pests. He doesn't explain spoilage or bacterial growth, but gestures to damp patches, then to healthy, dry herbs, and makes a sound of disapproval for the former. He also, with patient, wordless effort, constructs a small, simple cover for the communal water bucket at the fountain, a lid made of rough wood to deter flies and falling debris. He places it carefully, demonstrating its use with exaggerated motions. A few villagers watch, curiosity battling with ingrained habit. A child, one of the baker's own, runs up and carefully replaces the lid after drawing water, mimicking Arthur's gestures. A tiny, almost invisible thread of trust beginning to weave itself into the fabric of daily life. He feels the subtle shift in the glances he receives. Less outright suspicion, more a cautious acceptance, a silent acknowledgement of his usefulness. Children no longer shy away, but sometimes tug on his tunic, pointing to a loose brick or a broken latch, seeking his strange, silent problem solving. He offers a hand to an old woman struggling with a heavy basket, and she offers him a small, gnarled apple in return, her eyes soft with unspoken thanks. His modern assumptions about the need for verbal communication, for explicit instructions, have largely given way to a reliance on observation, demonstration, and shared practical outcomes. His expertise, once purely scientific, has been transmuted into something more primal. The ability to make things work a little better, a little safer, a little more efficiently. As the week ends, Arthur rests his tired body, the smell of wood smoke and freshly baked bread a comforting presence. He is still an alien, still acutely aware of the invisible dangers swirling around him, the plague looming like a thunderhead on the horizon. But he is no longer entirely alone in this strange, brutal world. He has found a way, through small, persistent acts of practical help to weave himself, however tenuously, into the lives of a few. He understands that trust here is not given lightly, but earned slowly, meticulously, one small, tangible improvement at a time. And in that quiet, arduous earning, he finds a fragile, hard-won sense of belonging that eases the profound ache of his solitude. The heavy, carved wooden door swings inward with a low groan, revealing a vast, cold expanse of gray stone. The air inside the cathedral is cool and still, carrying a faint, lingering scent of old incense, damp earth, and ancient marble. Utterly different from the clamor and stench of the streets he's grown accustomed to, he feels a sudden, profound quietness descend, muffling the distant sounds of the city into a soft, ethereal hum. His gaze sweeps upwards, following the soaring arches and vaulted ceilings, an architectural marvel that dwarfs him, making him feel impossibly small. He had ducked in on an impulse, seeking refuge from a sudden, biting wind, but finds himself captivated by the sheer scale and beauty. Light filters through high, stained glass windows, painting the dust-filled air in shifting patterns of ruby and sapphire. People are scattered throughout the massive space, kneeling in silent prayer, or simply standing, their faces turned towards altars bathed in candlelight. His microbiologist's mind, usually hyper-focused on the invisible dangers of cramped spaces, registers the vastness, the high ceilings, the open air flow, a different kind of environment. It feels, paradoxically, cleaner, less dense with immediate microbial threat than the bustling alleys outside, despite the congregation. This is a space of open air and cold stone, not damp, warm, crowded wood and straw. His modern assumptions about utility and function momentarily recede. This place isn't about efficiency or scientific truth. It's about awe, about collective belief, about something ancient and intangible. He observes the faces of the worshippers, a mix of weariness, hope, and deep faith. He sees an old woman, her rosary beads clutched tight, her lips moving in silent supplication, and her expression holds a peace he rarely sees outside these walls. He doesn't share their faith, his worldview shaped by observable phenomena and scientific method. Yet he can't deny the profound comfort this shared ritual provides to them. He stands quietly, a silent observer of a different form of human resilience. He finds a spot near a massive stone column, its surface cool and smooth under his fingertips. He appreciates the immense effort and ingenuity required to construct such a monumental building with medieval tools. It's a testament to human will, a massive, collective endeavor. He studies the intricate carvings, the faded frescoes, each telling a story, a history that transcends his immediate daily struggle for survival. Here, time stretches out, slow and expansive, offering a brief respite from the relentless present. The cold stone seeps into him, but it's a clean cold, not the damp, chilling cold of a pauper's alley. As the week ends and he leaves the cathedral, blinking in the harsher daylight, a subtle shift has occurred within him. The ever-present dread of disease and the grinding reality of survival still weigh heavily, but they are now tempered by a surprising memory of peace. He understands that while he fights an enemy that is microscopic, these people find strength in something vast and unseen, something that defies scientific explanation, yet offers immense comfort. The cathedral's cold beauty, its quiet echo, offered a moment of unexpected grace, reminding him that even in the most brutal of times, the human spirit seeks not just to survive, but to connect with something larger, whether that be faith, art, or the sheer, audacious ambition of creating something so enduring. The thick, gritty residue of flour, ash, and dried sweat cakes his hands, clinging stubbornly beneath his fingernails despite his best efforts to scrape it away. He catches a faint, almost metallic tang on his tongue from the constant grime, a taste he now barely registers. What would have once sent shivers of revulsion down his spine now feels normal. He presses his palms together, feeling the rough texture, and a strange, quiet confidence settles in. His hands are undeniably dirty, but they are also capable, hardened, and busy. This week, the fight against filth has become less a desperate struggle for sterility and more a pragmatic dance with inevitability. He still meticulously boils his drinking water, and he still tries to keep food surfaces cleaner in the baker's home. But his personal fastidiousness has adapted. He no longer flinches from touching communal tools or from the accidental brush against a stranger's unwashed arm in the crowded market. His modern assumptions about pristine environments have been thoroughly eroded, replaced by a grudging acceptance of a baseline level of dirt that is simply part of existence here. He understands that absolute sterility is an impossible dream, a fantasy of his former life. Instead, his microbiologist's mind has shifted its focus. He's learning to read the types of dirt, the sources of potential contamination. He knows the flies are a constant enemy, so he instinctively swats them away from food, covers bowls where he can. He understands that stagnant water is a danger, so he keeps an eye on puddles, avoids drinking from questionable sources, and encourages the emptying of slop buckets further from the main thoroughfare, making small, persistent gestures to demonstrate his reasoning. He isn't aiming for eradication, but for mitigation, a constant, quiet triage of microbial risk. This practical adaptation of his scientific reasoning, applied to an environment utterly lacking in modern tools, has given him a new kind of self-possession. He works beside the baker, his movements less hesitant, his touch less delicate than weeks ago. He now lifts heavy sacks of grain, kneads dough, and stokes the oven with a practiced ease, his body gradually hardening, his senses no longer overwhelmed by the pervasive odors and textures. He finds a strange empowerment in his newfound resilience, a testament to the human body's capacity to adapt to even the most challenging conditions. The Florentine citizens around him, once alien in their disregard for hygiene, now seem less like a petri dish waiting to explode, and more like fellow survivors, each navigating their own brutal reality. He still sees the illness, the coughs, the occasional vacant stare, but his personal fear is no longer paralyzing. As the week ends, Arthur scrubs his hands with coarse ash and cold well water, a ritual that is more about soothing his chapped skin than achieving true cleanliness. He catches his reflection in a small, polished metal basin. A gaunt, weathered face, eyes that hold a deep, knowing weariness, but also a flicker of fierce determination. He is still a microbiologist, but he is also something new, something forged in the grit and grime of a medieval city. His hands are dirty, yes, but they are his dirty hands. And in this harsh, unforgiving world, they have become his most vital tools for survival. He is learning to trust them, and in doing so, to trust his own evolving place within this raw, unyielding reality. A low, guttural moan escapes from a doorway across the narrow street, a sound that vibrates with a pain deeper than hunger or cold. He glances over, wiping flour dust from his hands, and his breath catches in his throat. A man, his face flushed with fever, stumbles out, his tunic hiked up by a nervous hand. And there, visible just beneath his jawline, a dark, swollen lump, angry and purple-black, pulses ominously. It's not a boil, not a simple abscess. Arthur knows precisely what it is. A bubo, a distinct, terrifying marker. His heart slams against his ribs, a cold, hard knot of pure scientific dread. Yersinia pestis. It's here. He sees the telltale swelling, the telltale color, the telltale location in the lymph node region. Every textbook, every lecture, every terrifying historical account he has ever consumed now flashes before his eyes with visceral, horrifying clarity. The quiet dread he carried has transformed into a deafening roar. This isn't a vague threat anymore. It's an undeniable presence, a physical manifestation of the invisible enemy he spent his life studying. His modern assumptions about containing epidemics, about antibiotics, about intensive care crumble to dust. The man collapses against the wall, his head lolling, and a few passers-by stop, their faces etched with confusion and fear. They cross themselves, murmur prayers, avert their gazes. Some recoil, instinctively creating a wider berth. Others watch with morbid curiosity, but none approach to help, beyond perhaps a hesitant gesture towards a priest. They see a curse, a divine punishment, a bad air, a corrupted humor. But Arthur sees the bacteria, the fleas, the rats, the swift, brutal mechanism of infection. He sees the inexorable advance of a microscopic army about to decimate their world, and he is the only one who truly understands its nature. The profound chasm between their understanding and his is suddenly terrifyingly vast, a lonely, isolating burden. He watches, paralyzed by knowledge, as the man groans, his hand instinctively going to the swelling. He sees the flies buzzing, landing. He sees the children playing nearby, oblivious. His hands, though hardened by work, feel impossibly clean, yet also impossibly useless. He feels a powerful urge to shout, to warn, to somehow intervene. But what words could he use? How could he explain a bacterial infection to people who believe in humors and miasma? His attempts at basic hygiene, the boiled water, the covered well, seem pathetically small, futile against such a widespread, insidious force. He feels the weight of his foresight, a crushing burden that promises a brutal harvest of lives. As the week crawls to its close, the moans and cries from the sick man's doorway continue, growing weaker, then eventually ceasing altogether. A heavy cart eventually comes, its driver's face grim, collecting the body. The silence that falls afterwards isn't one of peace, but of a terrifying, suffocating anticipation. He hears the quiet whispers in the market, the fearful glances exchanged. The Florentine citizens are beginning to sense the change in the wind, the new, palpable chill in the air. But they don't know the name of the storm that is gathering. Arthur does, and in that solitary, chilling knowledge, he feels a fear so profound it settles deep into his bones. A silence before a storm that will scream with death, the grim creak of the death cart's wooden wheels, a sound that was once infrequent, now echoes through the cobbled streets with unsettling regularity. It scrapes against the stones, a mournful dirge accompanying the heavy footfalls of the masked men who guide it. He catches the cloying, sweet smell of sick rooms and unwashed bodies, a smell distinct now from the general stench of Florence, infused with the undeniable aroma of decay. He watches from the baker's doorway, his hands clenching, as a sheet-wrapped figure is roughly loaded onto the pile, the form disturbingly small. A child. His gaze scans the faces of the onlookers, noting the growing pallor, the wide, fearful eyes, the nervous gestures of crossing themselves. The whispers have grown louder, the murmurs of pestilence, plague, now openly uttered, though always accompanied by attributions to God's wrath or corrupted air. He hears talk of ships from the east, bringing not just goods, but a terrible blight. He sees the fear, the desperation for explanation. But his modern mind, trained in epidemiology, sees the invisible truth. The fleas, the rats, the human-to-human transmission, the rapidly reproducing Yersinia pestis bacteria leaping from host to host, unchecked. His knowledge is a lens through which he sees their doom, an agonizing clarity in a world shrouded by ignorance. More people now exhibit the telltale buboes, not just in the armpits or groin, but on the neck, angry purpling lumps that swell grotesquely. He sees the feverish skin, the rapid, shallow breathing, the vacant, desperate eyes of the afflicted. He tries, subtly, to increase his own protective measures, covering his mouth and nose with a damp cloth when passing crowded, visibly sick areas, a habit that draws more wary glances. He still encourages boiling water and cleanliness around the baker's family. His quiet, persistent actions, creating a small, healthier island in a rapidly sickening sea. He watches the baker's wife, her face drawn, carefully scrubbing her hands after handling the child, a flicker of his lessons taking hold, however small. His modern assumptions about public health, about isolation and quarantine, feel like an impossible dream. Here, the sick are often left in their homes or taken to overcrowded infirmaries where contagion is rampant. There are no systemic efforts, no understanding of how to break the chain of infection. He observes a group of flagellants parading through the streets, whipping themselves in penance, believing that God's anger must be appeased. He sees the priests administering last rites, their faces grim, their faith severely tested. It's a world where spiritual remedies are the only hope, and scientific intervention is an unknown concept. As the week deepens into unrelenting sickness, Arthur feels the crushing weight of his unique perspective. He is a prophet of an unseen doom, witnessing the early stages of a wildfire he cannot contain, speaking a language no one understands. His scientific understanding is a heavy, isolating burden, forcing him to witness the escalating tragedy with a dreadful, agonizing clarity. He sees the inevitable unfolding, a relentless biological process, while around him, a world grapples with fear, superstition, and a pervasive, heartbreaking ignorance of the true enemy. The silence of their unknowing feels heavier than any clang of a death knell. The air itself seems to thicken, growing heavy with the cloying sweetness of rot, now undeniable and pervasive throughout Florence. He catches the sight of another hastily drawn red cross on a neighboring door, marking yet another home where the sickness has taken root. The incessant tolling of funeral bells, once a jarring sound, has become a constant, mournful backdrop to the city's diminishing hum. His gaze settles on a child barely older than the baker's daughter, sitting listlessly in an alley, a plum-sized bubo throbbing visibly in her neck. Her mother weeps openly, clutching a crucifix, oblivious to the buzzing flies that settle on the child's skin. A fierce, almost unbearable urgency surges through him. He sees the vectors, the rapid progression of the disease, the terrifying inefficiency of their current cures. Bloodletting, burning herbs, prayer. His mind races, cataloging simple, actionable steps. Isolation of the sick, disposal of the dead far from the living, thorough cleaning of infected areas, rudimentary sanitation, perhaps even a crude attempt at pest control against the ubiquitous rats and fleas. He knows these things could stem the tide, could save countless lives. His modern ethical framework screams at him to act, to intervene with the life-saving knowledge he possesses. He almost steps forward, his mouth opening, a wordless plea catching in his throat. But then, the baker's wary glance from his doorway, the memory of the healer's cautious acceptance, and the whispered accusations of Strano and Stregon from weeks past slam into him with chilling force. He remembers the burnings, the fear of the unknown, the absolute power of the church and local authorities. To speak of invisible worms in the water, of tiny creatures spreading sickness through the bite of a flea, would be to invite not gratitude, but terror and violent condemnation. His modern assumption that scientific truth, clearly demonstrated, would always be welcomed for its efficacy, is a dangerous fantasy here. His knowledge becomes a heavy chain, binding him to a solitary, agonizing vigil. He spends his days in a torment of suppressed action, performing his baking duties with a forced stoicism, his mind constantly turning over solutions that are impossible to implement. He cleans the bakery with obsessive vigor, trying to create a tiny, controlled environment. He discreetly tries to sweep away bread crumbs that might attract rodents, and he continues his silent campaign for boiled water. He notices the fear in the baker's eyes, the healer's quiet despair as more of their neighbors fall ill. He sees their rituals, desperate prayers, the waving of protective amulets, the fear-driven avoidance of the sick. Their attempts are based on a profound misunderstanding of the enemy, and he, the only one who truly understands, is condemned to silence. As the week ends, Arthur carries the crushing weight of his unspoken truths. Each new casualty, each mournful bell, is a fresh wound to his conscience. He is a man with a cure, forced to watch the epidemic unfold, his hands tied by the very knowledge that defines him, the decision to remain silent for his own survival, to withhold the most basic, life-saving information, gnaws at him with a moral ache far deeper than any physical pain. The whisper of intervention is a constant, torturous battle against the primal instinct of self-preservation. And each day, the stakes grow impossibly higher. A hurried, urgent knocking reverberates through the heavy wooden door of the bakery, a sound far more insistent and formal than the usual gentle taps of customers or the casual entry of the baker's family. It cuts through the familiar, comforting hum of the oven and the quiet rustle of flour. He glances at the baker, whose brow furrows in surprise. Then the door creaks open, revealing a man clad in finer, dark wool, a fur-trimmed cap on his head, his face drawn and pale, lines of profound worry etched around his eyes. This is the local medicus, a man of some learning and authority, and his gaze sweeps the room with an air of desperate urgency before settling briefly on Arthur. The physician gestures to the baker, his hands wringing, his voice low and strained. Arthur, understanding little of the words, perceives the desperation. He sees the physician's trembling fingers, the beads of sweat on his forehead, despite the cool air. The man points towards the growing number of red crosses on doors, mimics a hacking cough, and then dramatically gestures to the skies, a universal sign of supplication or accusation of divine will. His modern mind fills in the blanks. The plague is accelerating its grim march through Florence, and their traditional remedies are proving utterly useless. The physician is clearly at his wit's end, seeking answers, any answers, in an increasingly terrifying void. A chill, not of cold, but of profound responsibility, washes over Arthur. He sees the doctor's plight, the utter helplessness. His microbiologist's brain immediately conjures images of what he knows, the Yersinia pestis bacilli, replicating exponentially, overwhelming the body's defenses. He envisions the steps: clean water, basic sanitation, isolating the sick, burning infected belongings, controlling the rat population, recognizing the role of fleas. His scientific ethics scream at him to share, to explain, to intervene. This isn't just a handful of villagers now. This is an entire city on the brink. But then, the chilling reality of his situation slams back into him. How do you explain bacterial disease to a world that believes in miasma, humors, and divine retribution? To speak of invisible worms or creatures smaller than a grain of sand would invite not understanding, but charges of heresy, of consorting with dark forces. He remembers the suspicion he's already garnered, the whispers of Strano. His modern assumptions about the logical acceptance of scientific evidence are a dangerous luxury here. To offer his truth could mean saving a few lives, perhaps, but almost certainly sacrificing his own in a horrific public spectacle. The risk is immense, not just to himself, but potentially to the small, fragile trust he's built with the baker and the healer. He watches the physicians retreating back, the heavy door closing, sealing off his desperate plea. The baker looks at Arthur, his own face mirroring confusion and fear, a silent question in his eyes. Arthur can only shake his head slowly, a deep, weary sigh catching in his throat. He holds his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the shared terror. As the week draws to a close, Arthur's internal battle rages. The image of the desperate physician, the cries of the sick, the tolling bells, they all press down on him. The knowledge he holds is a potent weapon, but one so anachronistic it could be a fatal boomerang. He stands at a precipice, forced to choose between the silent, agonizing preservation of his own life and the potentially deadly, futile attempt to save others with truths they are utterly unequipped to comprehend. The weight of that choice, the crushing burden of knowing and being unable to act, gnaws at his very soul. The biting chill of the night air cuts through his thick tunic, carrying with it the usual medley of Florence's sleeping, odors, damp stone, lingering refuse, and the unsettling sweetness of decay. But tonight, there's another, sharper scent, the metallic tang of an iron bucket, and the earthy smell of disturbed mud. He works in the deep shadow of the communal well, the only light provided by the sliver of a crescent moon and the faint, distant glow from a handful of street lamps. He feels the cold, rough stone of the well curb against his knees as he lowers a weighted, makeshift brush. A bundle of thorny branches lashed to a long pole. Into the dark depths, his microbiologist's mind, fueled by the desperate physician's plea from last week and the escalating death toll, has finally overridden the powerful instinct for self-preservation. This is a secret act of defiance, a quiet, perilous gamble against fate. He has spent days gathering these materials, careful not to draw attention. And now, under the cloak of darkness, he attempts a rudimentary form of water purification. He churns the water, scraping the sides of the well, dislodging layers of algae, sediment, and countless unseen microorganisms. His modern assumptions about municipal water treatment, about chlorination and filtration plants, feel like a cruel joke in this primitive, dangerous context. But he knows that even reducing the microbial load, however crudely, could make a difference, particularly against waterborne illnesses that weaken the body against the greater threat. He pulls up bucket after bucket of murky, fouled water, each one heavier than the last, his muscles screaming with the effort. He carries the foul water far from the well, emptying it into the gutters that drain towards the Arno, trying to ensure it doesn't simply seep back into the groundwater. He works in an intense, silent focus, listening for any approaching footsteps, any stray dog bark that might betray his presence. The baker's family, the healer, the few faces who have shown him kindness, their lives flicker through his mind, a silent prayer. He is doing this not just for abstract scientific principles, but for them, for the faint hope of an invisible ripple effect. His hands are raw, scraped by the branches, and his body aches with a profound weariness. But a strange, fierce resolve sustains him. He isn't fighting Yersinia pestis directly with this act. He knows that. But he is fighting the secondary infections, the dysentery, the countless other maladies that prey on weakened bodies, making them more susceptible to the plague. He is applying his knowledge in the most primal way possible, trying to create a margin of safety where none exists, a single, clean bubble in a sea of contagion. This is a tangible act, a physical manifestation of his expertise, however crude and dangerous its execution. As the first faint streaks of dawn paint the eastern sky, he finishes, exhausted, replacing the wooden cover on the well and melting back into the shadows. His body trembles with exertion and cold, but his mind feels a quiet, desperate triumph. He has performed a silent ritual of prevention, a perilous defiance of the overwhelming fate that looms over Florence. He knows the immense risk he has taken, the potential accusations of dark magic should his strange actions be discovered. But for a fleeting moment, as he thinks of the cleaner water flowing into the bucket, he feels a profound, almost spiritual connection to his purpose, an invisible ripple sent out into a dark, unknowable future. A subtle shift permeates the air this week, not a new smell, but a lessening of a familiar one. The cloying sweetness of fresh decay, which had been growing more potent each day, seems to have retreated slightly in his immediate vicinity. The funeral bells still toll, a constant, mournful rhythm across Florence. But near the baker's district, their frequency seems to have lessened, however marginally. He observes the baker's children, their faces a little less pale, their movements a little more energetic. The occasional complaints of stomach humors and bad bowels from the neighborhood seem to have become less frequent. He watches people drawing water from the communal well he secretly cleaned. A quiet sense of scientific validation, a fragile warmth in his chest. His microbiologist's mind immediately connects the dots. The reduced incidence of gastrointestinal distress, the brighter eyes, the slight uptick in energy. These are not direct signs of warding off the plague, no, but they are undeniable indicators of improved general health. Cleaner water, even in this rudimentary way, means fewer waterborne pathogens, stronger bodies, less weakened by dysentery and common infections, might stand a marginally better chance against the looming threat of Yersinia pestis. He knows the change is infinitesimally small in the grand scheme of the city. But here, in this small pocket, his perilous, secret act has yielded a tangible, if subtle, result. His modern understanding, his targeted intervention, is working. But as the days pass, he also notices a different kind of shift in the villagers' demeanor towards him, the cautious acceptance he had slowly built, the nods of respect for his useful, practical skills are subtly replaced by something more unsettling. Eyes that once met his with simple curiosity now dart away, averted when he approaches. Whispers, hushed and quick, follow his path in the marketplace. Words like strano still present, but now tinged with something colder, more fearful, perhaps in natural, unnatural. He sees women quickly cross themselves when he passes, men clutching small amulets more tightly. The baker, though still sharing food, now watches him with a new, somber thoughtfulness, his usual boisterousness tempered by an unspoken unease. The healer, however, observes him with a knowing, almost understanding gaze. She watches the healthier children, watches Arthur's quiet, deliberate movements, and offers no words, only a subtle tightening of her lips, a shared knowledge in her ancient eyes. She understands the power of unseen forces, though she attributes them to spirits and magic rather than bacteria. His modern assumption that positive outcomes lead to positive recognition is proving dangerously naive. In a world where illness is divine will or miasma, unexplained health improvements, especially from an outsider with strange habits, are not miracles. They are suspicious, potentially diabolical. As the week ends, Arthur walks the streets of Florence, the success of his intervention a double-edged sword. He feels the satisfaction of having made a difference, of having applied his unique knowledge to protect, however slightly, the lives around him. But he also feels the chilling consequence of that success. The averted eyes, the hushed whispers, the deepening suspicion, they are the invisible payment for his silent defiance. He has dared to subtly alter fate, and in doing so, he has drawn attention, a dangerous, potentially deadly spotlight in a world quick to condemn what it cannot comprehend. The knowledge that he has helped, even a little, is a powerful motivator. But the growing fear of being branded a sorcerer, of being cast out or worse, is a cold, relentless shadow growing long behind him. The sharp, resinous smell of pine tar used to seal cracks in the healer's crumbling walls, mixes uneasily with the familiar, comforting aroma of dried herbs. The low fire in her hearth casts long, dancing shadows, but her eyes, usually warm and knowing, now hold a steely, analytical glint as they fix on him. He feels the weight of her gaze, less an invitation to shared work, and more a quiet, intense scrutiny. She observes him as he tidies bundles of sage, separating the wilted leaves, his hands moving with the methodical precision of a lab technician, a precision that feels increasingly out of place here. This week, the subtle ripple of his interventions has reached deeper than just the baker's family. children who drink the boiled water and follow his exaggerated hand-washing gestures seem to weather the common seasonal ailments with more resilience. Word unspoken but understood travels through the narrow lanes. Fewer stomach complaints, less persistent fevers among those who, perhaps out of desperation or simple curiosity, adopt his strange, silent practices. It's an undeniable, if small, localized success, a testament to his microbiologist's understanding of basic sanitation and infection control, however primitive the tools. But this success is also a growing source of tension. He notices other local healers, older women with their own carefully guarded lore, occasionally visiting the main healer's dwelling. They eye him with thinly veiled suspicion, their glances sharp, their expressions tight. He sees them watching him, their heads bent in hushed conversation with the main healer, their fingers occasionally pointing in his direction. They discuss a particular family whose children, previously sickly, are now unusually robust despite the mounting plague. They see not a scientific correlation, but an unnatural deviation, an inexplicable imbalance, a magical intervention outside their understanding. His modern assumption that results would breed acceptance is being undermined by the very lack of explanation for those results within their worldview. He tries to maintain his quiet, helpful demeanor, to be useful without being ostentatious. He continues to mend, to organize, to assist the healer in grinding herbs, making poultices. He even suggests, through gestures, the importance of cleaning wounds with heated water, demonstrating the careful pouring of warm water over a small cut on his own hand. The healer observes, her brow furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She allows it, but her silence is no longer one of quiet understanding, but of deep, cautious thought. His methods are efficacious, undeniably so, but their efficacy, divorced from any recognizable explanation, begins to hint at something dangerous, something that challenges their established order, their very understanding of the world. As the week ends, the cold of the stones outside feels less chilling than the growing unease in the healer's eyes. He is no longer just strano, but efficace in modo strano, strangely effective. His scientific training, which should be his greatest asset, is becoming his greatest liability. He has dared to alter the local micro-ecosystem of human health, and in doing so, he has inadvertently disturbed the socio-spiritual ecosystem of Florence. The successes he meticulously crafts are precisely what make him a target, twisting his attempts at salvation into something that could be perceived as a malevolent, magical force. He understands with chilling clarity that the whispers of witchcraft are no longer just rumors among the superstitious, but a calculated, fearful scrutiny from those whose own authority and understanding are being silently challenged. A child's high-pitched voice, usually a sound of innocent joy in the narrow Florentine streets, cuts through the general clamor with unexpected clarity. He hears a hushed, sharp whisper, a word he now recognizes as stregon, sorcerer. He feels the prickle of awareness on the back of his neck, even before he turns. A small girl, perhaps 7 years old, stands frozen in an alleyway, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and stark fear. She points a trembling finger directly at him, then quickly ducks behind her mother's skirt, burying her face. The mother pulls the child close, her gaze flickers to him, then away. Her expression a chilling blend of anger and apprehension. His heart contracts, a cold knot of dread and guilt tightening in his chest. This isn't just the vague suspicion of a few elders or healers. It's a child, innocent and unburdened by adult societal nuances. Openly naming him, he remembers the burnings, the accusations, the swift, brutal justice for perceived witchcraft in this era. His modern assumption that ignorance would merely lead to dismissal, not outright condemnation, shatters. His quiet successes with hygiene and boiled water, meant to mitigate suffering, have somehow warped into something sinister in their eyes, an unnatural interference with divine or natural order. Throughout the week, this incident hangs heavy in the air, a chilling portent. The whispers no longer feel distant or abstract. They are directed, pointed, accompanied by averted eyes and quick, fearful gestures of warding off evil. Even the baker, his longtime patron, seems more reserved, his usual gruff warmth replaced by a cautious distance. He still offers Arthur work, but the shared meals are quieter, the easy camaraderie replaced by an unspoken tension. Arthur observes the fear in the faces of the villagers, a profound, visceral terror of the unseen, the unexplained, the unnatural. His rational, scientific mind understands their fear, even as it condemns their conclusions. He sees himself not as a bringer of prevention, but as a dangerous anomaly. He limits his public appearances, sticking to the shadows, working in the dark of the bakery. He still tends to the well at night, driven by a desperate hope to protect what little health he can. But his movements are more furtive, his senses more alert to danger. He sees more red crosses on doors, more funeral carts, and the plague continues its relentless march through Florence. The irony is a bitter pill. He possesses the knowledge that could truly save them, but the mere appearance of that knowledge, untranslatable into their worldview, marks him for destruction. His attempts at prevention have not created gratitude, but suspicion, a dangerous consequence he had failed to fully anticipate. As the week ends, Arthur finds himself alone in the bakery. the familiar sounds of kneading and crackling fire offering little comfort. The child's pointing finger, the hushed word, stregon, replays in his mind. A constant, chilling echo. He carries the heavy weight of his scientific understanding, a burden that now threatens to crush him. He feels the profound guilt of having potentially endangered himself and those who have shown him kindness. He is trapped between the moral imperative to intervene and the terrifying reality of his anachronistic presence. The choice between saving lives and saving his own has now become a direct, immediate threat, and the path he walks is narrowing to a single, perilous thread. The sharp, metallic tang of fear, mingled with the usual scent of wood smoke and old flour, is palpable in the baker's home. He feels the frantic touch of the baker's wife on his arm, her eyes wide with a terror that needs no translation. She points to a small bed in the corner, where the baker's eldest son, a strapping young man of perhaps 17, lies curled under a rough blanket. His skin is flushed, his breathing shallow and rapid, and Arthur can see the telltale swelling, a dark, angry bubo already forming beneath the boy's jawline. A profound coldness washes over him, a sense of scientific dread compounded by personal anguish. This is different. This isn't a stranger, a face in the crowd. This is a young man he has shared meals with, laughed with, worked beside. This is a member of the family that offered him warmth and a fragile sense of belonging in this alien world. His microbiologist's mind immediately goes into overdrive, analyzing the situation. The bubo is clearly visible, meaning the infection is already systemic. He sees the telltale fever, the delirium setting in. He knows, with a chilling certainty, the likely outcome. His modern assumptions about the clear divide between professional knowledge and personal attachment shatter. The plague has touched his nascent community, his nascent friends, and the burden of his secret knowledge intensifies to an unbearable degree. He watches the baker, his usually strong frame bowed with despair, kneeling beside his son, murmuring prayers, his rosary clutched tight. The baker's wife hovers, trying to cool the boy's forehead with a damp cloth, her tears flowing freely. The healer arrives, her face grim, examining the boy with a practiced, weary hand, then shaking her head slowly. She applies a poultice of crushed herbs to the bubo, a ritual meant to draw out the evil humors. But Arthur knows, with a sickening certainty, that it will do nothing against the multiplying bacteria. He sees the futility, the desperation, and the immense, terrifying gap between their understanding and his. His hands ache to intervene, to administer antibiotics, to clean, to isolate, to do something. He thinks of the small, hidden vial of penicillin he somehow still possesses, a modern miracle, now a poisoned chalice. To use, it would be to expose himself, to reveal his unnatural abilities, to confirm their deepest fears of witchcraft, and potentially condemn himself to a horrific death, but to do nothing, to watch this young man, who shared his bread and his laughter, succumb to an enemy he understands so intimately, feels like a profound betrayal, a moral failing he may never recover from. His professional ethics are at war with his personal survival, a brutal, soul-crushing conflict. As the week passes, the boy's condition deteriorates rapidly. His moans grow weaker, his breathing more ragged. The warmth of the bakery, usually a comfort, now feels oppressive, heavy with sickness and despair. Arthur works, but his movements are mechanical, his mind haunted by the image of the bubo, the fever, the silent plea in the boy's eyes. By the end of this agonizing week, the baker's son is gone, taken by the silent, unseen enemy. Arthur feels the profound, chilling cost of his secret knowledge. He saved others through subtle actions, but when it truly mattered, when a friend's life hung in the balance, his inability to openly intervene, to reveal his anachronistic truth, sealed a terrible fate. The weight of his unique perspective is no longer just a burden. It is a brand, a mark of isolation, a terrible, unspoken grief for what might have been. He understands that the plague isn't just a biological event. It is a crucible, burning away everything but the raw, agonizing choices of humanity. The sudden absence of chatter when he enters a shop, the quick glance away of a passerby, the way children are subtly pulled closer to their mothers. These are the new, chilling sounds of his daily life in Florence. He feels the invisible wall of fear and suspicion growing thicker around him, a tangible barrier that separates him from the very people he has tried, however subtly, to help. The air, already heavy with the stench of disease, now seems to carry an added layer of dread, specifically directed at him. He catches glimpses of villagers making protective signs, their eyes wide with apprehension. This week, the weight of the baker's son's death settles deep within him, intertwining with the growing fear he instills in the community. He understands now that his small, anomalous successes with hygiene and boiled water, his strange aversion to filth, his quiet attempts to mend and organize, have solidified into a dangerous narrative in their minds. When the plague rages, and some in his immediate vicinity seem slightly less affected, or recover from lesser ailments with unusual speed, it is not seen as a testament to his modern understanding of health. Instead, it is attributed to something unnatural, something that tinkers with fate, a dark magic. His modern assumption that demonstrable efficacy would eventually win trust has proven tragically flawed. He walks with a heavier step, a self-imposed cloak of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The cold knot of guilt, a constant companion since the boy's death, hardens within him. He sees the fear his actions sow, the terrified glances, the hushed whispers, and he accepts it as the inevitable price of his interference. He is owning the shadow, the role of the outsider, the stregon they whisper about. He still continues his nightly ritual at the well. Driven by an ethical imperative he cannot ignore. But now his movements are even more furtive, his senses acutely tuned to any hint of observation. He is a ghost, moving through their world, trying to save them, while simultaneously becoming the very thing they fear. He finds himself retreating further into the ordered logic of his microbiologist's mind, a sanctuary from the illogical, superstitious terror around him. He meticulously observes the spread of the plague, counting the new red crosses, tracking the grim trajectory of the disease through the city, an agonizing, silent study. He sees the desperate prayers, the flagellants, the increasing chaos and desperation, and his knowledge remains a silent, screaming truth within him. The healer offers him a small, bitter root one day, her eyes full of a complex mix of warning and a strange, shared understanding. She sees the danger he presents, but perhaps also the true, desperate intent behind his strange ways. As the week ends, Arthur finds himself standing apart, quite literally. The usual warmth of human connection, once a fragile comfort, has now receded, replaced by the chilling isolation of being feared. He carries the heavy burden of his knowledge, a secret that saves but also condemns. He understands that in this ancient world, his very existence, his very nature as a man of science, is an anachronism so profound, so utterly out of place, that it can only be interpreted as unnatural, as witchcraft. The cost of saving lives here is not just his own survival, but his very humanity, as he becomes a silent, feared force, a shadow moving through a doomed city. The air in the healer's small, herb-scented room grows heavy, not just with the familiar aromas of dried plants, but with the distinct, metallic tang of fever. He feels the oppressive warmth radiating from the bed where the old woman lies, her breathing shallow and ragged, her face pale and glistening with sweat. A plum-sized bubo pulses angrily in her armpit, a horrifying confirmation of his deepest fears. This is not a stranger. This is the woman who offered him a cautious place, a silent understanding in a world filled with suspicion. He sits on a low stool beside her rough pallet, a quiet, unwavering presence. The baker's wife, her own face etched with grief from her son's recent passing, had brought him here, her eyes pleading for his strange, silent help. He watches the healer's fitful sleep, her body racked with shivers, then burning with heat. His microbiologist's mind registers the relentless biological battle raging within her. The Yersinia pestis bacteria rapidly overwhelming her system. He knows the grim prognosis, the near impossibility of recovery without modern medicine. Yet his feet remain rooted. The woman who saw beyond his strangeness, who offered him a sliver of acceptance, lies dying. He gently dips a cloth in the boiled water he meticulously prepared and places it on her feverish forehead. Her skin feels searing hot, dry and papery to his touch. He replaces the cloth repeatedly, a silent, methodical act of care. He moves with a quiet grace, keeping the small room as tidy as possible, sweeping away dust, shooing the ubiquitous flies with a careful hand, trying to mitigate what little he can, knowing it's a futile fight against the systemic infection. His modern assumptions about clinical care, about sterile environments, are impossible here. But his fundamental urge to comfort, to alleviate suffering, to be present, transcends centuries. At one point, her eyes flicker open, hazy with fever, and she reaches out a trembling hand. He takes it, his rough, calloused fingers gently closing around her fragile, bony ones. Her grip is weak, but surprisingly warm. He feels the pulse racing beneath her skin, a frantic drumbeat against his palm. There are no words exchanged, no elaborate declarations, but in that simple, shared touch, a profound connection blossoms. It's a connection forged in shared vulnerability, in the raw, primal reality of life and death, stripped of language and cultural divides. For a moment, the chasm of time seems to shrink, and he is simply one human offering comfort to another. He spends the nights of this week in a shared vigil with the baker's wife, who also sits quietly, murmuring prayers. They are two figures in a dimly lit room, united by their helpless love for the old woman. He sees the quiet strength in the baker's wife, her faith unwavering even in profound grief. He draws a strange, deep comfort from her presence, a shared humanity that, for a fleeting time, outweighs the terrifying weight of his secret knowledge and the chilling fear he inspires in others. His attempts at intervention here are not about grand scientific victories, but about a simple, compassionate presence. As the week ends, the healer's breathing grows shallower, her hand growing colder in his. He feels the undeniable ebb of life, a brutal, visceral experience. Yet, despite the grief, something has shifted within him. In the face of death, a powerful, quiet connection bloomed, reminding him that beneath all the scientific understanding, the historical context, the fear and suspicion, lies a universal human capacity for empathy, the warmth of a simple, held hand, a gesture that transcends time and knowledge, proved to be a profound and unexpected source of solace in the encroaching darkness. The faint scent of singed wool and rosemary, residue from the healer's funeral pyre, still lingers in the cool morning air. a stark reminder of loss. He feels the rough, comforting warmth of a shared woolen shawl draped around his shoulders, an unspoken gesture of solace from the baker's wife. Their eyes meet across the small, crowded burial ground, a silent acknowledgement of shared grief, and in her gaze, something new blossoms, a flicker of understanding that transcends mere friendship, a depth of connection born from tragedy and shared vulnerability. He sees her, a woman of strength and quiet resilience, her hands calloused from work, her face etched with the recent sorrow of losing her son and now her friend, the healer. Yet in her eyes, there is also a fierce, protective spark, a deep humanity. He sees her caring for her surviving children, tending to the hearth, offering him comfort even in her own profound pain. His microbiologist's mind, usually dissecting the world into pathogens and vectors, now sees her as a whole, complex being, a symbol of enduring life in the face of overwhelming death. His modern assumptions about romantic love, often built on shared intellectual interests or social compatibility, seem trivial in comparison to the raw, unspoken bond forming between them. He finds himself drawn to her presence, a quiet anchor in the escalating chaos of Florence. He helps her with chores, chops wood, carries water, his every movement aimed at easing her burden. He watches her interact with her children, her gentle touches, her soft murmurs, and he feels a deep, unexpected longing for such simple, profound intimacy. He thinks of his life before, a life of sterile labs, academic papers, and solitary pursuits. That life, once his entire world, now feels impossibly distant. A cold, empty existence compared to the vibrant, if brutal, humanity he has found here. They share a bowl of stew one evening, sitting by the dying embers of the fire, the children asleep. Her hand, worn and warm, brushes his as she reaches for a piece of bread, and a jolt, electric and profound, passes through him. He looks into her eyes, and for the first time, he doesn't just see a present moment of shared grief or survival. He sees a possible future, however perilous. He imagines a life here alongside her, raising her children, living in this harsh world, not just as a silent, fearful observer, but as a participant, connected, loved. It's a dangerous fantasy, a desperate hope in a time of unprecedented despair, but it is also a powerful, undeniable pull. As the week ends, Arthur walks the city streets, the omnipresent scent of sickness and the mournful bells still a brutal reality. But now, woven into that grim tapestry, is the warmth of a burgeoning connection, a fragile, desperate hope for a different kind of future. He is still a microbiologist, carrying the burden of his knowledge, the secret stregon of the village. But he is also a man who has looked into the eyes of another human being and seen, In the midst of plague and death, the undeniable, precious flicker of true love. The terrifying unknown of the future now holds a new, bittersweet possibility, a profound question mark etched onto his very soul. The faint, almost forgotten scent of antiseptic alcohol, sharp and clean, suddenly stings his nostrils. It's an olfactory phantom, triggered by the bitter tang of a hastily made herbal poultice applied to a child's scraped knee in the baker's home. For a blinding moment, he is not in Florence, but in his meticulously sterile lab. The familiar hum of the laminar flow hood a gentle background drone. The precise glint of polished stainless steel reflecting the cool, fluorescent lights. He sees himself, clad in a crisp white lab coat, gloved hands deftly maneuvering a pipette. The perfectly round, clear droplets of solution falling into a Petri dish, each one free of any visible contaminant. The air is filtered, the surfaces gleaming, the entire environment a testament to control, to order, to the absolute mastery over the microscopic world he once commanded. The vision shatters, leaving him blinking back into the flickering, smoky light of the medieval hearth. His hands, caked with flour and grime, tremble slightly. His rough tunic feels itchy and heavy. The air is thick with the pervasive smell of wood smoke, sweat, and the underlying sweetness of decay that never truly leaves the city. The child whimpers, her knee already swelling beneath the crude poultice. His modern assumptions about hygiene, about the ease of preventing infection, about the sheer control he once had, rush back with an almost physical force, wrenching his gut with a terrible ache. He watches the baker's wife, her brow furrowed with concern, gently bandaging the child's leg with a strip of rough linen. Her movements are loving, desperate, utterly devoid of the scientific precision he once wielded. He sees the flies buzzing around the open wound, landing on discarded food. He feels the dampness of the earth floor, the pervasive, undeniable filth that surrounds them. A stark, brutal contrast to the gleaming surfaces of his memory. The internal conflict is agonizing. The longing for the safety and efficacy of his old world, for the tools and knowledge that made him powerful, battles against the deep, visceral connection he has forged here, especially with this family, with the baker's wife. His microbiologist's mind continues to function, albeit on a primitive level. He discreetly retrieves a clean, boiled cloth, trying to wipe the wound a little cleaner before the poultice is fully applied. A small, furtive act of rebellion against the pervasive ignorance. He tries to shoo the flies with more vigor. A silent, desperate battle. He wonders if he will ever again feel the smooth, cool plastic of a sterile Petri dish, the precise click of a microscope lens. He thinks of the sophisticated instruments, the endless resources of his former life, and then of the crude thorns and dirty water he uses to clean the well. The ash for soap. His effectiveness here is marginal, dangerous, constantly undermined by the very fabric of this era. As the week ends, Arthur carries the heavy weight of his fragmented self, the memory of his lab, of his ordered, controlled scientific world, is no longer a distant dream, but a vivid, painful ghost, haunting his every waking moment. It stands in stark, brutal contrast to his present reality, a constant, agonizing reminder of what he has lost and what he can never truly be in this time. He is a man divided, his soul pulled between the sterile clarity of the future and the brutal, human warmth of the past, forever caught in the wrenching chasm of centuries. The gritty dust of limestone and sand catches in his throat, a constant, dry irritation. But the clean, earthy smell of freshly mixed mortar is a welcome change from the pervasive stench of the city. He feels the surprising heft of a stone in his gloved hands. Rudimentary leather work, gloves he painstakingly made. As he carefully lowers it into place, feeling the cool, rough surface settle with a satisfying thud, the sun, a rare and welcome warmth this time of year, beats down on his back as he works, his muscles aching with a familiar, almost comforting strain. He is helping to build a small, sturdy home for the baker's wife and her remaining children, a tangible act of commitment to this new, fragile existence. The baker, grief-stricken by the loss of his son, had grown increasingly withdrawn, unable to cope with the relentless demands of the bakery and the mounting fear. Arthur, with the baker's wife's silent, pleading gaze, had stepped in, taking on more responsibility, not just in the bakery, but in their lives. Now they are constructing a new, smaller dwelling adjacent to the bakery, one that can be more easily kept clean, more easily defended against rodents. His modern assumptions about efficient construction, about blueprints and power tools, are useless here. Instead, he applies his scientific mind to the practicalities of medieval building, observing structural integrity, understanding the properties of materials like stone and lime, learning from the rudimentary techniques of the few remaining local laborers, many of whom are too fearful to work on plague-ridden streets. He uses his meticulousness, his eye for detail, to ensure the stones are laid evenly, the mortar spread thickly, making the walls as solid as possible. He instinctively tries to seal off potential entry points for rats, to create smoother, more easily cleaned surfaces, applying his understanding of disease vectors to the very architecture of their survival. He even constructs a raised hearth, hoping to keep cooking surfaces away from the dirty floor. These are not grand interventions, but small, persistent efforts to create a safer, healthier environment within the brutal constraints of their world. He observes the baker's wife working alongside him, her strength and determination a constant inspiration, her silent gratitude a powerful motivator. He finds a strange, deep satisfaction in the physical labor, the tangible progress of walls rising from the earth. Each stone laid is a defiance against the plague, a small act of hope against overwhelming despair. He feels a connection to this work, to this new home, to this fragile family that runs deeper than any scientific pursuit. He is no longer just a microbiologist out of time. He is a builder, a protector, a silent anchor for a family adrift in a storm. His identity is shifting, slowly but irrevocably, from the academic to the pragmatic, from the observer to the participant. As the week ends, the scent of fresh mortar still heavy in the air, Arthur stands back, wiping sweat from his brow, and looks at the rising walls. The small home, still incomplete, represents a monumental commitment. He is choosing this life, this struggle, this connection, over the ghostly echoes of his past. The plague still rages, the fear still lingers, and the whispers of Stregon still follow him. But in the physical act of building with stone, of creating a sanctuary in the heart of the chaos, he finds a profound, if perilous, sense of purpose. He is making a home not just for them, but for himself, a tangible anchor in the swirling current of time, a commitment to a future that is entirely of this medieval world, yet deeply influenced by his modern hand. The rich, damp scent of Florentine earth, turned over by his own rough hands, fills his nostrils. It's a smell deeply rooted, primal, unlike any filtered air of a modern city. He feels the cool, crumbly soil beneath his fingernails as he plants a small cluster of hardy herbs near the new dwelling, hoping to cultivate a tiny, accessible source of mild antiseptics and fever reducers. This simple act of digging, of tilling the ground, awakens a profound realization within him. His roots are sinking here, into this ancient, living soil. His heart, once a detached observer, now beats with the rhythm of this unforgiving, beautiful place. This week, as the small stone house takes shape, he works tirelessly, his body now accustomed to the demanding physical labor. The constant ache in his muscles, once a source of complaint, has become a badge of his adaptation, a testament to his sheer physical presence in this world. The modern memories, once stark and vivid, now feel like fading photographs, distant echoes from a life that is no longer his. His scientific mind, though still burdened by its unique knowledge of the plague, has found a new, practical focus, creating a small, defensible bubble of health and stability for the baker's family and for himself. His daily rituals of boiling water, meticulous cleaning, and discreet pest control have become deeply ingrained, almost unconscious acts of survival. He watches the baker's wife, her presence a quiet, constant comfort as she gathers firewood, her movements efficient and strong. He sees her children playing, their laughter, though sometimes tinged with the pervasive sadness of their world, a precious sound. He finds a deep, visceral satisfaction in providing for them, in helping to build this sanctuary, however temporary. The stregon whispers still follow him, a low, unsettling hum at the edges of his awareness, but they no longer consume him. His commitment to this family, to this fragile, hard-won existence, has overshadowed his fear of condemnation. His modern assumptions about individualism, about personal advancement, have dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of communal responsibility and belonging. He spends evenings in the new, unfinished dwelling, sitting by a small, temporary fire, sharing meager rations with the baker's wife and her children. The air is cold, but the shared warmth of their bodies, the silent camaraderie, is a profound comfort. He looks at their faces, illuminated by the flickering flames, and sees not just people from another time, but his people, his family. The thought of returning to his old life, once a driving desire, now feels alien, a cold, uninviting prospect. The sterile labs, the impersonal interactions, the relentless pursuit of abstract knowledge. It all seems hollow, devoid of the raw, tangible meaning he has found here. As the week ends, Arthur scrapes the Florentine earth from beneath his fingernails, his heart full with a complex mix of grief for the world he lost, and a fierce, undeniable belonging in the world he now inhabits. The constant threat of the plague is still a brutal reality, a shadow that never truly lifts. But for the first time, he feels a profound, almost spiritual rootedness. This soil, however ancient and fraught with peril, is his home. His heart truly belongs here now, beating in rhythm with the echoes of ancient bells and the quiet resilience of a family he has come to love. A microbiologist who has finally, fully, become a man of the 14th century, finding his purpose not in observation, but in the gritty, desperate act of living. A shrill, piercing cry cuts through the already tense air of the marketplace, slicing through the vendor calls and the shuffling feet. Stregon, the word, sharp and accusatory, slices through the usual din like a physical blow. He feels a sudden, profound silence fall around him, the usual bustling activity abruptly freezing. Every head swivels. His own breath catches in his throat, a cold, metallic taste blooming on his tongue. A woman stands a few paces away, her face contorted with grief and rage, her finger, bony and trembling, pointed directly at him. Her eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, burn with a desperate, all-consuming fury. He recognizes her dimly as a neighbor from a few streets over, a woman whose entire family had recently succumbed to the plague. Her accusation, fueled by unimaginable loss and the pervasive fear gripping Florence, ignites a spark in the volatile crowd. He feels the sudden, palpable shift in their collective gaze. The wary glances, the averted eyes, the subtle avoidance of weeks past, transform into something far more dangerous: open hostility, suspicion, and a chilling, predatory curiosity. Murmurs rise, low and guttural. Words like demonio, malvagio, evil, wicked, beginning to weave into the fabric of the market. He sees men clenching their fists, women clutching their children, fear twisting their features into masks of accusation. His microbiologist's mind races, a desperate, futile attempt to rationalize the irrational. He thinks of the well he cleaned, the boiled water he advocated, the basic hygiene he demonstrated. These were acts of science, of life-saving prevention, yet in their eyes, divorced from any comprehensible explanation, they are proof of dark, unnatural powers. His modern assumption that logical actions would eventually be understood and appreciated has collided with the brutal, medieval reality of superstition and fear, creating a direct, immediate threat to his life. He stands frozen, his hands, once accustomed to precise scientific instruments, now feel heavy, useless, and alarmingly exposed. The baker's wife, who had accompanied him to the market, gasps, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and anguish. He sees her glance flicker to the increasingly agitated crowd, then back to him, a silent plea for him to somehow explain, to diffuse this sudden, terrifying danger. But there are no words he can speak, no scientific truths he can utter that would not condemn him further. The memory of the children's pointing fingers, the healer's knowing, wary gaze, the physician's desperate helplessness, all crystallize into this single, terrifying moment. He is caught irrevocably between his life-saving knowledge and the deadly ignorance that surrounds him. As the week reaches its abrupt, terrifying climax, Arthur feels the crushing weight of the accusation, the angry shouts, the hostile stares, the undeniable physical threat of the gathering crowd is all too real, too visceral. His quiet, clandestine attempts to nudge fate, to offer a fragile shield against the plague, have finally come to this. He is no longer just an alien observer or a helpful eccentric. He is the named enemy, the witch, and the air around him crackles with a chilling, immediate danger, a direct consequence of his inability to bridge the chasm of centuries, of his very being a defiant, perilous anachronism. The stale, musty air in the small, stone-walled chamber is thick with the smell of old parchment, fear, and unwashed bodies. He feels the rough wood of the bench pressing into his back, his hands bound tightly with rough rope, prickling with pins and needles. Before him sit the village elders, their faces grim and unyielding in the flickering light of tallow candles. A robed priest, his eyes cold and severe, sits at the head, a heavy cross clutched in his hand. The accusation from the marketplace, the word stregon, still echoes in the suffocating silence, a terrifying precursor to his fate. He is here, accused of witchcraft, his miracles twisted into malevolent acts, his microbiologist's mind, usually so precise and analytical, struggles to find a framework for defense. How do you explain germ theory to men who believe sickness is divine wrath or an imbalance of humors? He sees the fear in their eyes, the desperate need for an explanation, a scapegoat in the face of an incomprehensible plague that defies their understanding. His modern assumption that truth would always be a shield, that logic would prevail, is shattering against the hard, unyielding wall of medieval belief. He watches the accusers, mostly those who have lost much, their voices choked with grief and rage, recounting his strange habits. The boiling of water, the meticulous cleaning, his aversion to rats and flies, the unexpected health of some of the children in the neighborhood, the inexplicable healing of small wounds, each act intended as a measure of prevention, is presented as proof of his unnatural powers, his tampering with life and death. His scientific mind recognizes the observational data, the circumstantial evidence, but knows its interpretation is fatally flawed. He gestures towards the cleansed well, towards the children of the baker's wife, miming health, trying to convey a simple cause and effect relationship. He points to the flies, then to sickness, then to the clean water. A desperate, silent plea for reason. The baker's wife stands in the corner, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly. A silent witness. Her gaze meets his, full of anguish and a desperate, unwavering loyalty that brings a painful ache to his chest. The priest's questions, translated by a nervous townsman, speak of pacts with unseen forces, of charms and spells. He shakes his head vigorously, attempting to convey denial, frustration, a desperate plea for them to see the simple, practical truth. He is a man of science, not magic. But in this world, the two are tragically indistinguishable when not understood. As the week culminates in this terrifying ordeal, Arthur feels the profound isolation of his knowledge. He is utterly alone in his understanding, facing a judgment based on beliefs so ancient, so fundamentally different from his own, that there is no common ground for discourse. His only defense is the tangible proof of better health. But that very proof is twisted into an accusation. By the time the elders adjourn, their faces still grim, their decision unspoken, Arthur feels a profound exhaustion. He is physically and mentally drained. But a new, fierce resolve has hardened within him. He may not be able to articulate germ theory, but he can continue to show its effects. He understands that this is not a trial of logic, but a trial by fire. An ancient battle between the fear of the unknown and the silent, undeniable power of observation and careful practice. His life hangs in the balance, his fate intertwined with the slow, perilous struggle to introduce a glimmer of modern reason into a world consumed by ancient, terrifying beliefs. The heavy silence in the baker's home is more suffocating than any market crowd. He feels the rough, calloused hand of the baker's wife on his arm, her grip tight, pleading. Her eyes, usually so strong, are wide with desperation and unshed tears. She gestures frantically to her children, huddled together, their small faces pale with fear from the accusations and the somber atmosphere of his trial. Then she points towards the city gates, a clear, unspoken instruction to flee. The stench of plague still hangs heavy in the Florentine air, a constant reminder of the death surrounding them. But now, a new, more immediate threat looms over Arthur. He holds in his hand a small, cold, metallic object, hidden for weeks. The last, precious vial of modern antibiotics. A small, anachronistic miracle. It is a tiny glass bottle, holding enough penicillin to save perhaps a handful of lives from secondary bacterial infections, or perhaps even a nascent plague case if administered early enough. It is his last tangible link to his old world, his greatest secret, his ultimate dangerous power. His microbiologist's mind knows its immense value, its potential, but also the catastrophic danger of its revelation. To use it would be proof of his witchcraft, a definitive condemnation. To keep it and flee might save himself, but leave this family, the woman he has come to love, to face the full, unmitigated horror of the plague. His modern assumptions about individual liberty and survival are brutally pitted against a profound sense of loyalty and a desperate ethical dilemma. He looks at the baker's wife, her face etched with a silent, wrenching plea for the safety of her children. He sees the fear, but also the trust she places in him, a stranger who has become her protector. He thinks of the small, stone house they are building, a fragile sanctuary, to abandon them now, to save himself and his secret, feels like a betrayal of everything he has become in this brutal world. He closes his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him, a crushing burden. The memory of the baker's son, lost to the plague despite his knowledge, haunts him. He opens his eyes and looks at the vial, then at her, then at her children. With a deep, shuddering breath, a decision, agonizing and profound, solidifies within him. He cannot flee. He cannot keep this ultimate tool of salvation hidden while those he loves face certain death. But he also cannot expose himself, for that would lead to his own demise. And then who would protect them? Even in small ways, his mind, working with a desperate precision, finds a third path. He places the vial in her hand, his fingers briefly closing over hers. He then gestures emphatically towards the communal well he cleaned, then to the vial, then mimics placing a small amount of liquid into water, then drinking. He mimes a small wound healing, a fever breaking. He tries to convey, without words, the idea of a potent, purifying essence for their water, a blessing against sickness. As the week culminates, Arthur feels the profound, wrenching cost of his choice. He has surrendered his most precious, dangerous item, his last tangible link to his old world, a sacrifice for the fragile safety of this family. He has taken a colossal risk, revealing the existence of something miraculous, and trusted it to hands that understand faith, not science. The fate of the vial and his own now rests on the knife edge of medieval interpretation. The dread is immense, but beneath it, a strange, quiet peace settles. He has made his choice. He has chosen connection over isolation, action over inaction, and a desperate, perilous hope over the certain emptiness of self-preservation. This soil, these people, this love, they are his now, and he will fight for them, even if it means facing the fire himself, the frantic scurry of a rat across the cobblestones, usually a sound he barely registers, now sends a jolt of terror through him. He presses himself deeper into the shadowed recess of an alleyway, the cold, damp stone seeping through his tunic, the scent of refuse and fear, thick and cloying, fills his nostrils. Above the general din of the dying city, he hears it, the heavy, purposeful tread of approaching footsteps, the low, guttural murmur of voices searching. The hunters, he can feel their breath, a chilling, metaphorical presence just around the corner. His microbiologist's mind, usually dissecting pathogens, is now in full primal survival mode, analyzing every shadow, every distant sound. He hears the harsh, guttural Italian words for witch and demon, interspersed with descriptions of his strange behavior. His secret, his identity, is fully exposed, twisted into something malevolent. The decision to share the penicillin, to make that desperate gamble for the baker's family, has indeed led to this. The whispers of witchcraft, once a distant threat, are now a very real, very present danger, manifesting as relentless pursuit. His modern assumption that doing good would lead to good consequences has proven fatally naive in this brutal, superstitious age. He moves with a desperate stealth, his body aching, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He utilizes every ounce of his observational skill, honed in the lab, to navigate the complex, labyrinthine alleys of Florence. He notices the subtle changes in the light, the faint echoes that indicate an open space, the discarded piles of refuse that offer temporary cover. He learns to press himself against walls, to hold his breath as patrols pass, to make himself as invisible as possible. The irony of being hunted for saving lives, while the true killer, the plague, ravages the city unchecked, is a bitter, agonizing truth. He thinks of the baker's wife and her children, their faces etched with fear, the small vial of life-saving antibiotics now in her possession. He hopes she understood his gestures, that she is using it wisely, discreetly. He hopes his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The knowledge that he is a fugitive, that his life is now forfeit, is a heavy, crushing weight. But within that weight, a strange, fierce pride flickers. He acted. He intervened. He risked everything for those he cared for the chance to fight the unseen enemy on their terms, however indirectly. His modern ethics, his scientific imperative, led him to this perilous path. And he does not regret the choice, only the consequence. As the week ends, Arthur finds himself deeper in the city's forgotten corners, in the shadows beneath crumbling arches, in abandoned courtyards. The sound of pursuit has grown fainter, but the primal fear remains. He is utterly alone, hunted, his identity as a microbiologist, a man of science, now redefined as a sorcerer, a threat to this ancient world. He is a ghost in the making, his future uncertain, his survival a minute-by-minute struggle. Yet in the terrifying silence of his hiding place, a strange sense of clarity settles. He has truly embraced this world, not as an observer, but as a participant, his fate irrevocably intertwined with its harsh, beautiful, and terrifying reality. The hunter's breath may be near, but so is the fierce, indomitable will to survive, not just for himself, but for the ripple he set in motion, a tiny, precious spark of defiance against the overwhelming darkness. The sharp, metallic tang of his own blood, mingled with the pervasive stench of the city, stings his tongue. He feels the raw, burning scrape of cobblestones against his cheek, the lingering pain of a rough shove. His clothes are torn, a gaping rip revealing his skin, and his meager pouch of coins is gone. Stripped of everything, physically battered and utterly alone, he lies for a moment in the cold, damp alley, the distant cries of the plague-ridden city, a mournful lullaby. Yet instead of despair, a strange, fierce resilience ignites within him, a primal spark forged in this medieval fire. He pushes himself up, his limbs screaming in protest, his vision momentarily blurred. His modern assumptions about safety nets, about recourse and justice, have long since vanished. Here, there is only the brutal, immediate reality of survival. His scientific mind, though still reeling from the physical assault, immediately assesses his situation: injured, exposed, no resources. He is now at his most vulnerable, a living experiment in raw, human endurance. This isn't just about avoiding plague anymore. It's about the sheer, animalistic will to continue existing. He begins to move, slowly at first, then with increasing determination, navigating the city's underbelly. He learns to forage for edible scraps with a new desperation, discerning which fallen fruits are not too rotten, which discarded vegetables might still offer sustenance. He finds a broken piece of pottery, sharp enough to cut, and a discarded, sturdy stick, transforming them into rudimentary tools. His microbiologist's observational skills, once applied to cellular structures, are now focused on minute details of his environment, the subtle shifts in human traffic, the scent of a hidden food source, the safest way to cross a perilous street unnoticed. He is learning to be a predator, a scavenger, a ghost. He sees the increasing chaos in Florence, the overflowing death carts, the desperate prayers in deserted churches, the faces of the living etched with a profound, pervasive grief. The plague is no longer a looming threat, but a full-blown catastrophe, claiming lives indiscriminately. His own peril, the constant hunt for the stregon, is now just one thread in a larger tapestry of suffering. He feels a strange detachment from his former self, the academic, the man of comfort. That man, with his pristine labs and ordered life, feels like a distant, almost forgotten dream. This rough, determined, utterly stripped-down being, bleeding and hungry, moving through the shadows. This is his true self, forged in the relentless crucible of medieval adversity. As the week ends, Arthur finds a temporary refuge in a long-abandoned cellar, its air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. He bandages his wounds with strips of cloth torn from his tunic, his movements practiced and efficient. He eats a handful of dried berries, a meager feast, and looks out at the sliver of moon visible through a grate. He is alone, hunted, seemingly at the lowest point of his existence. Yet, a fierce, indomitable will pulses within him. He has been stripped of everything, but in that stripping away, he has found a core of resilience, a raw, uncompromising strength he never knew he possessed. He is a survivor, a fighter, a man remade by the brutal, beautiful, terrifying fire of his medieval reality. His scientific mind, now a sharp, adaptive tool for primal survival. The faint, lingering ache in his left shoulder, a dull throb from his recent injuries, has become a familiar, almost comforting presence. He traces the raised scar on his forearm, a jagged line from a childhood bicycle accident, now almost indistinguishable from the myriad new calluses, cuts, and scrapes that crisscross his hands and arms. The distinct smell of damp stone and old timber, the constant companions of his hiding places, has replaced the sterile air of his old world. Each physical mark, each ache, tells a tale of survival, a testament to the brutal, relentless journey he has endured. He sits in the dark, his microbiologist's mind no longer focused on lab work, now sifts through the tapestry of his experience. He recalls the blinding fear of waking in this strange, filthy world, the relentless gnawing of hunger and cold. He remembers the child's vacant stare, the first bubo, the agonizing choice to risk intervention, the joy of shared laughter, and the crushing weight of accusation. Each memory is sharp, vivid, a scar on his soul. His modern assumptions about life, comfort, safety, and justice have been systematically stripped away, replaced by a raw, visceral understanding of human resilience, desperation, and the sheer, unyielding power of nature. He runs his fingers over the rough fabric of his tunic, feeling its worn threads, thinking of the crisp lab coat he once wore. That man, Dr. Arthur Finch, microbiologist, feels like a character in a distant novel, a phantom from another lifetime. This man, Arthur, silent, resourceful, hunted, with dirty hands and a fierce will to live, is the reality. His scientific knowledge, once his identity, has been transmuted into a primal, applied wisdom. How to find clean water, how to avoid contagion through subtle observation, how to build, how to hide, how to survive. He has learned to read the subtle signs of the wind, the movements of people, the hidden pathways of the city, with a precision that rivals his former microscopic analysis. He thinks of the baker's wife, her courage, her quiet strength, and the children he risked everything for. He wonders about the small vial of antibiotics, a tiny ripple in the vast ocean of the plague. Did it help? Did it save them, even one? He will likely never know for certain. But the act itself, the choice to sacrifice his last piece of his old world for their precarious future, has defined him. His emotional landscape is etched with the grief of loss, the terror of pursuit, but also the profound, unexpected warmth of human connection, and the fierce, quiet dignity of choosing to fight for life in the face of overwhelming death. As this week, like all the others, draws to a close, Arthur feels a deep, quiet wisdom settling within him. He is scarred, both physically and emotionally, but those scars are not weaknesses. They are maps, chronicles of a profound transformation. He is no longer defined by what he lost, but by what he has become. A man forged in the crucible of medieval fire, his modern knowledge a silent, guiding force, his human heart irrevocably changed. He has learned that survival is not just about avoiding death, but about finding meaning in the fight, about adaptation, not just of the body, but of the soul. He is a ghost of the future, living fiercely and fully in the brutal, beautiful present, his every breath a testament to a journey far beyond science. From his hidden vantage point high above a narrow street, the scent of fresh wood smoke, mingled with the faint aroma of cooked grains, drifts up to him. He feels the cool stone beneath his hands as he carefully shifts, peering down. Below, in the small courtyard behind the baker's new dwelling, a scene unfolds that stills his racing heart. The baker's wife, her figure strong and resilient, is boiling water over a small fire, deliberately and methodically. Her children, their faces bright and lively, help her carry smaller pots, and before they eat their meager meal, he watches them meticulously wash their hands, rubbing them with ash, and then rinsing them with the precious, boiled water. A profound, quiet warmth spreads through him, deeper than any physical heat. It's a realization that his efforts were not in vain, that a seed of his knowledge, however small and anachronistic, has taken root. He sees the communal well, now regularly covered, a small wooden lid diligently replaced by children and adults alike. He observes the area around the new home, noticeably cleaner than surrounding alleys, with fewer food scraps and a marked absence of the bold, ubiquitous rats. It's a tiny, resilient garden of hope, a testament to the slow, persistent power of demonstrated practice. His microbiologist's mind identifies it as an epidemiological success, a micro-community inadvertently protected. He watches unseen as the baker's wife carefully pours a small amount of liquid from a familiar, small glass vial into the children's drinking water. A wave of both profound relief and chilling apprehension washes over him. She understood. She used the penicillin. He sees the children vibrant and active, and a desperate hope blooms within him. His sacrifice, his dangerous gamble, has paid off, at least for them. This quiet, growing legacy of health, sustained by her steadfast actions, feels like a monumental victory against the overwhelming darkness of the plague. A silent butterfly effect rippling through time, the constant threat of being discovered, of being hunted, still lingers. He sees occasional patrols in the distance, hears the continuing mournful bells from other parts of the city. The plague still rages, an unseen monster devouring Florence. But in this small corner, in the actions of this resilient woman and her children, he sees a quiet defiance, a subtle pushback against fate, his modern assumptions about the necessity of direct, overt instruction, about clearly articulated scientific principles, have been replaced by a deep understanding of the power of consistent, practical demonstration, passed on through observation and trust. As the week ends, Arthur remains hidden, a silent guardian, his face grim, yet his heart lighter than it has been in weeks. He is an unseen force, a whisper of modernity in an ancient world, a man who has chosen to remain in the shadows for the sake of a fragile, blooming future he has helped cultivate. The profound satisfaction of witnessing this small community continue his hygiene practices, of seeing the subtle signs of health in the faces of children, is a potent antidote to the fear and isolation. He realizes that his purpose here is not to change the world, but to protect a tiny, precious corner of it. A quiet, growing legacy of health that is his unique, perilous gift to a dying age. This garden of hope, however small, is enough to sustain him, to give meaning to his continuing, dangerous existence. The scent of soft, unfamiliar linen, faintly perfumed with dried lavender and wood smoke, replaces the rough, familiar wool of his tunic. He feels the unfamiliar weight of skirts swishing around his legs, the soft cloth of a veil settling over his hair, obscuring his face. His hands, though still calloused from labor, now move with a new, practiced grace as he adjusts the folds of his garment. This is not a disguise in the simple sense of deception. This is a profound, almost spiritual embrace of a new persona. A quiet, complete acceptance of a female identity adopted for survival, for protection, and for a deeper sense of belonging in this relentless, ancient world. The baker's wife, her eyes full of a fierce, protective love, had painstakingly assembled these clothes for him, teaching him the subtle gestures, the way a Florentine woman carries herself, the tilt of the head, the careful posture. His microbiologist's mind, always adept at observation, rapidly absorbed the nuances. He learned to walk with smaller steps, to keep his gaze lowered, to blend into the background of women going about their daily chores in a city where men are dying by the thousands, where the plague has left countless widows and orphans. A solitary man, known for his strange ways, is a dangerous anomaly. A quiet, unassuming woman, however, might move with less scrutiny, less threat. His modern assumptions about gender roles, about the fixed nature of his own identity, have dissolved under the immense pressure of survival. He feels a strange liberation in this adopted identity. The fear of being hunted, once a constant shadow, now lessens, replaced by the subtle, collective invisibility of being one among many women. He can move more freely, observe more openly, without drawing the same immediate suspicion. He can visit the cleaned well, check on the baker's family, offer small, unobtrusive assistance, his actions less likely to be interpreted as the strange workings of a stregon. He even finds a quiet comfort in the anonymity, the quiet strength inherent in the women who sustain this dying city. He is not Arthur Finch, microbiologist. He is now simply one of them. He catches a glimpse of his reflection in a shallow puddle, a veiled figure, nondescript, blending seamlessly into the tapestry of Florence. The face beneath the veil is still his, aged and weathered, but the person looking back feels fundamentally altered, redefined by the very act of this transformation. He still carries the burden of his knowledge, the agonizing clarity of the plague's true nature, but he now carries it within a new shell, a protective layer that allows him to continue his quiet, dangerous work of mitigation. As the week closes, Arthur walks through the market, the scent of spices and damp stone familiar, his steps now light and confident. He has shed his old self, not as an act of calculated deception, but as a profound internal shift. He has embraced the veil, not as a hiding place, but as a true manifestation of his chosen identity in this medieval world. He understands that adaptation is not just about changing actions, but about changing who you are deep down to survive and thrive. He is no longer just a microbiologist out of time, but a woman of Florence, a quiet, resilient presence in the heart of the plague, her very being a testament to the fluidity of self in the face of absolute extremity. The bright, clear sound of children's laughter rings through the small courtyard, a precious, unexpected melody in the plague-ridden city. It's a sound of unburdened joy, of life vibrant and strong, and it cuts through the constant, mournful tolling of distant funeral bells like a beacon of pure light. He feels the warmth of the spring sun on his veiled head as he chops kindling, his movements rhythmic and practiced. The scent of clean laundry drying on a line, mingled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread, fills the air around the baker's new dwelling, a sanctuary against the pervasive stench of death that still permeates the wider city. He watches the baker's children, strong and healthy, chasing each other around the courtyard, their energy a stark contrast to the listless, feverish children he so often sees in other parts of Florence. He sees them draw water from the covered well, then diligently wash their hands before sharing a piece of fruit. He notices the subtle but undeniable health that radiates from this small community. This tiny pocket of resilience he has helped cultivate, his microbiologist's mind, always observing, registers the data. Lower incidence of common ailments, brighter eyes, a vitality missing from so many others. It is a testament to his perilous interventions, the silent ripple effect of his knowledge. The baker's wife smiles at him, a warm, knowing gaze that speaks volumes. She has not forgotten his true nature, nor the danger he faced, but she has embraced the wisdom he offered, integrated his strange practices into their daily lives. Her strength, her trust, her willingness to adopt his blessings from the vial have been pivotal. He feels a profound, deep peace settle within him, a sense of purpose that transcends any scientific acclaim he might have achieved in his old life. This, he realizes, is his true legacy, his real impact. Not a Nobel Prize, but the sound of healthy children laughing in a dying city. He lives now as one of them, fully immersed in the rhythm of their lives. His adopted female identity, a protective shroud that allows him to continue his quiet work. The fear of being hunted has receded, replaced by the profound satisfaction of belonging, of contributing, of actively shaping a tiny, better future. His modern assumptions about the need for recognition, for explicit validation of his science, have been replaced by the quiet, undeniable proof of life and health thriving against overwhelming odds. The intellectual burden of his unique foresight is still present, but it is now tempered by the powerful, visceral joy of witnessing life protected. As this, his 39th week, draws to a close, Arthur sits by the hearth in the new home. The sound of the children's soft, breathing a gentle lullaby. He is still a microbiologist, but he is also a mother, a protector, a silent force of life in the heart of death. The cold, analytical dread of what is to come, the ongoing horror of the plague, has not vanished, but it is now overshadowed by a powerful, enduring sense of peace. He has found his place, his purpose, and his profound, quiet victory. He has brought light into a terrible darkness, and in the laughter of these healthy children, he finds a true, unwavering solace. His journey has been long, brutal, and fraught with peril. But in this moment, in this small, vibrant pocket of life, he feels utterly, unequivocally at home. The warm, golden kiss of the late afternoon sun bathes her face, a gentle caress against skin weathered by medieval winds and Florentine grime. She feels the cool, rough texture of the ancient stone wall beneath her hand as she stands on a sun-drenched hill overlooking the sprawling, ancient city. The air carries a myriad of scents. The distant, familiar tang of wood smoke and refuse, but also the sharp, clean aroma of cypress and olive trees on the breeze. From this vantage point, Florence spreads out below, a patchwork of red-tiled roofs and gray stone, a beautiful, brutal landscape that has become, unequivocally, her home. 40 weeks. 40 weeks since Arthur Finch, microbiologist, awoke in a world utterly alien. Now, as she gazes down at the city, the man he was feels like a ghost, a whisper from a distant dream. The female identity she adopted for survival is now more than just a disguise. It is an intrinsic part of who she is, her movements graceful, her presence quiet and observant, her hands, once accustomed to sterile instruments, are now calloused, scarred, and capable, perfectly adapted to the demands of this relentless world. She thinks of the gnawing hunger, the bone-deep cold, the terrifying illnesses, and the constant fear of accusation and death. Each memory is a thread in the rich, complex tapestry of her transformation. Her eyes scan the familiar cluster of homes in the baker's district, seeing the subtle signs of health she helped nurture: a covered well, tidier courtyards, children playing with a vitality that is rare in this time of plague. She thinks of the baker's wife, her silent strength, her fierce love, and the enduring trust that blossomed between them. The small vial of penicillin, a dangerous miracle from another age, remains a secret shared between them. Its invisible ripple affect a testament to both modern science and medieval courage. Her microbiologist's mind still categorizes, still analyzes, still understands the invisible enemy that continues to claim lives below. But that knowledge, once a source of paralyzing dread, is now a silent, guiding wisdom, integrated into every fiber of her being. A constant, quiet vigilance. She turns her gaze to the winding Arno River, reflecting the golden light, and then to the distant mountains, their peaks hazy in the late light. This city, this brutal, beautiful, ancient place, is no longer a temporary exile. It is where her heart has taken root, where her purpose has solidified. The desire to return to her old life, once a burning ache, has faded to a faint echo, replaced by a profound, if perilous, contentment here. Her modern assumptions about control, about progress, about individuality, have been shattered and rebuilt into a deeper understanding of human resilience, interconnectedness, and the raw, vital essence of simply being. As the sun dips lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she feels a deep peace, profound and unwavering. The plague still rages in Florence, an undeniable, ongoing horror, but she, a microbiologist transformed into a woman of the 14th century, is ready. She is no longer fighting a lost battle against time and ignorance. She is living, surviving, and protecting in the present. Her hands, her heart, and her unique knowledge now fully dedicated to this world. She understands that home is not a place in time, but a state of being, forged in fire and love, embracing whatever future, however uncertain, this ancient, living city holds.